Cold, not as much fog around, but likely to stay quite grey over parts of northern England. Still some snow showers coming in over the Northern Isles. The breeze picking up down to the southwest. Quite a lot of high cloud here. And again, temperatures struggling to get much above freezing. Feeling colder as the wind picks up. But actually, temperatures getting up to 6 or 7 in the southwest late in the day. As this next feature comes in, that is worth keeping an eye on, because that could bring some wet weather into the southwest, hitting the cold air, the potential for a little bit of snow for parts of Devon and Cornwall. So we need to keep our eyes on that. At the same time, further wintry showers coming in across the north and the east. So it is a wintry week, some fog around and further snow and ice to come over the next few days.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're watching GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up this hour, 3 boys aged 8, 10 and 11 have died after being pulled from an icy lake in Solihull on Sunday. 4 children were rescued by police and firefighters after falling through the ice at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. They were taken to hospital in critical condition after suffering cardiac arrest. Police say the 3 could not be revived. A fourth, aged 6, is still being treated. Search operations continuing to determine if there was anyone else in the water. Emergency crews have been told 6 people had been seen on the ice. We'll have the latest from the scene. UK's economy will get worse before it gets better. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has issued that warning after figures reveal the economy contracted by 0.3% between August and October. Yet more hard evidence that we're heading into recession. We've got the latest analysis from our economics editor, Liam Halligan. And the travel chaos is continuing across the country with the cold weather biting. Heavy snowfall and ice has hit road, rail and airports. Let us know how you're coping where you are. Get in touch at GBViews at gbnews.uk and, of course, send us your pictures too. But first, the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Mark, thank you and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 12. 3 boys have died after being pulled from an icy lake in Solihull on Sunday afternoon. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11, were in cardiac arrest when they came out of the water at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. The children were reportedly playing on the ice and had fallen through. The West Midlands Fire Service says the search of the lake is continuing to establish if anyone else fell into the water after reports that as many as 6 children may have been involved.
Our hearts absolutely go out to the families and friends of the youngsters that have been involved. But what we have to say is a thank you to the emergency services that were on scene instantly, and the people that went in. Clearly they went into the water, put their own lives at risk as well.
Yellow warnings of ice, fog and snow are still in place for much of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. It was the coldest night of the year so far, reaching below -15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties have been felt in the east and south of England. There are still significant delays across the rail network, with southeastern trains telling people not to travel. Gatwick and Stansted have reopened after closing their runways on Sunday, leading to the cancellation of more than 100 flights. Weather journalist Nathan Rao gave GB News his advice to drivers.
Going on long car journeys when this is going on is not a good idea. If you do have to do essential journeys, make sure you're prepared, because if your car breaks down, remember that it will get cold in the car. You'll not be able to heat it. So take blankets, take hot drinks, make sure you're prepared. Try and avoid long journeys. I know it's difficult because the trains are on strike all this week and the airports are in chaos. But be prepared. If you're in your car overnight in these temperatures, you need to be ready for it.
Britain's economy grew between September and October, but has still shrunk over the last 3 months. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show a 0.5% increase in GDP in the month. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the numbers underline the government's failure to grow the economy. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has warned there's a tough road ahead.
These figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
Government ministers are holding an emergency Cobra meeting later in a bid to minimise disruption from ongoing public sector strikes. The military and civil servants are being trained in case they need to step in for airport staff as they prepare to strike for 8 days from the 23rd of December to New Year's Eve. The armed forces will be deployed to hospital trusts as ambulance staff, nurses and paramedics walk out later this month. The Foreign Secretary has vowed to forge new partnerships beyond the UK's traditional allies. In his first key speech in the role, James Cleverly celebrated Britain's traditional alliances, but promised to build relations with influential Asian, Latin American and African countries. He said he'll make a long-term effort to maintain old friendships and build new ones beyond the UK's allies.
In the coming decades, an ever greater share of the world economy, and therefore the world's power, will be in the hands of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That reality has been evident for some time, but I am not convinced that British diplomacy has fully caught up. My goal is to build on the work of my predecessors and ensure that we do catch up. And under me, that task has begun.
Meanwhile, the International Trade Secretary will arrive in India later as the UK strives to restore a free trade deal. Kemi Badenoch will meet Indian ministers and business leaders in New Delhi for the first formal round of talks since July. The negotiations are expected to focus on cutting tariffs and opportunities for UK financial and legal services. The government is still in the process of negotiating a free trade agreement with India after the target of securing a deal by October was missed. The King and the Queen Consort have revealed this year's Christmas card. The photograph was taken at the Braemar Royal Highland Gathering just days before the Queen's death. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, back to Mark.
Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. So in this past hour, West Midlands Police confirming that 3 boys aged 8, 10 and 11 have died after being pulled from that icy lake in Solihull. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. Well, emergency services had been called to Babs Mill Park in the Kingshurst area of Solihull in the West Midlands yesterday afternoon. It was reported the children had been playing on the ice before falling through the surface into the lake. Let's get more now, though. West Midlands reporter Jack Carson, who's there. And Jack, clearly, despite heroic efforts by the public, police and firefighters to get the youngsters out, it was just too much for them.
That's exactly right, Mark. When the police were called at 2:36 p.m. yesterday afternoon, the ambulance only took 7 minutes to get here. When it had arrived, a member of the police and members of the public were already in the lake trying to rescue these 4 boys from it. All four were brought out of the lake and given CPR here. They received critical care here on the scene and also in the ambulance on the way. 2 were taken to Birmingham Heartlands Hospital, 2 to Birmingham Children's Hospital. But like you said, in the last hour, West Midlands Police confirming that 3 boys aged 11, 10 and 8, after being rushed to the hospital from being pulled from the water, sadly could not be revived, and the police, ambulance service and all the emergency services sending their thoughts to the families. Like you mentioned, a 4th boy who's aged 6 remains in a critical condition in hospital, and searches of the lake are continuing. The very latest is that in the last kind of 20 minutes or so, we've seen police on a boat out on the lake still searching. Witness reports yesterday suggested there might be another mother, possibly 2 children that were involved in this incident, and the search is ongoing to make sure that those people, if they are there, can be found.
Yeah, clearly, given the conditions, that may have to be a recovery rather than a rescue operation. We can see police behind you. I gather there have been divers actually getting into the water, clearly with specialist suits to prevent any kind of hypothermia. I gather one officer had to be taken away suffering with hypothermia earlier.
Yes, so last night, crews continued into the night to continue this, what was initially a search and rescue operation, now branded a recovery operation. The area commander of the West Midlands Fire Service saying that due to the ages of the children involved and the temperatures, that this would no longer be a search and rescue operation when it came to this morning, and that operation continuing. Like you mentioned, the police officer that jumped into the lake yesterday to try and save these boys has been taken to hospital with mild hypothermia. He's expected to make a full recovery, but like you say, divers here, people just making sure, if anything, to make sure that those witness reports of possible further children involved are not involved, and just to make sure and get the facts right, to make sure before this operation is concluded. We are expecting a press conference within the next 25 minutes or so to get some more answers on what's going on here. But for this community, people here have started to come together, started to lay flowers, and it's so devastating that it's a time of Christmas when many of these children that have sadly passed away would have already had presents and their families ready to spend Christmas with them. Of course, it's leading up to the final week before school leaves for Christmas, and so that factor in this makes this whole situation so much more devastating.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely awful, as you say, for the families and the community there. We will have that news conference live here on GB News, but clearly the warning also going out to children and parents not to go anywhere near any bodies of water at the moment, given that even though it may look it's frozen, clearly that ice can be quite thin.
Exactly. It's very cold. It's the negative temperature here today, Mark, and it's very cold, and that there's still a thin layer of ice on the lake that's refrozen overnight. But the police warning, ambulance, fire services, all emergency services, local politicians, the leader of Birmingham City Council has been here to pay his respects here at the scene and speak to the community and be part of the community coming together here, and all reinforcing that same message that in these times of cold weather, under no circumstances should anyone be going near a lake at all, or any kind of body of water that could well cause an accident like we've seen here, unfortunately, yesterday.
Jack, thank you very much for updating us. And as I said, we'll have that news conference from West Midlands Police, of course, as it starts. Thank you very much. Now, let's move to other news, with Britain's economy actually growing, yes, growing by 0.5% between September and October, according to the Office for National Statistics. Well, that activity being explained largely by an increase in spending with the unplanned bank holiday, of course, following the Queen's funeral. But economists predicting we are still on course for that recession by the end of the year. The following, after the figures being announced, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt saying the economy will get worse before things get better.
Well, these figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
Let's get more analysis with Liam Nara, economics and business editor with On the Money. So good news, but still bad news.
Kind of good news, Mark. I've got some graphics here and I'll walk you through them now. And GB News listeners on the radio will just have to bear with me during this. I'll explain everything. So in October, we did see GDP rise.
Which is growth in the economy, yeah.
By 0.5%. Right. And we can see that there on the graphic. But that was partly because in September, GDP fell because we had the unfortunate death of Her Majesty the Queen, we had the extra bank holiday, and a lot of people, frankly, slowing down a little bit. So we had growth in October. Then between August and October as a whole, that's what we call the third quarter of the economy, the third 3 months, if you like, GDP actually fell 0.3%. Now, some people, if we look at the next graphic, think that that now means a recession is looming, because the Bank of England there, Mark, is predicting for the final quarter of 2022, that's October, November, December, they think that GDP is going to fall again by 0.3%. 2 successive quarters of falling GDP. That's the textbook definition of a recession. So, yes, the headlines are about that little growth uptick in October, but the bigger picture is of a slowdown.
But do the statistics give us any clue as to how we could claw ourselves out of this situation? What sort of areas were actually growing in that small period? I mean, were people going out and spending money on anything specifically?
Retail sales did hold up quite well. Again, the headlines were positive because the value of retail sales in November was up. But again, if you look at the fine print, the volume of retail sales are down. How can that be? That's because we were spending more in pounds and pence, but because of inflation, the cost of living, we were getting less for our money. So the retailers are actually getting less value. But it hasn't been a washout Christmas at all, and there's still a way to go. This is the first Christmas we've had without lockdown looming over us for a couple of years, Mark. Yes, there are strikes. They'll play a very important part in the economic outlook, not just in December, but in January, and I'd say for the whole of the first quarter of 2023. But this Christmas by no means looks like a washout, despite the strikes that we're seeing.
OK, but so we got Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, saying, well, you know, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Yeah. But one does wonder about, clearly they're hanging tough on all the industrial relations.
They are.
And letting the strikes go ahead. Would it actually benefit the country's economy to actually solve some of these disputes, so you get the economy moving, you get people back on the trains, you get them with money in their pocket to spend out on the streets?
It depends how you solve it, Mark. Many people would worry that if the government does cave and say, oh, yeah, the nurses can have 19%, that's £10 billion. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we can give a few £1 billion to the train operating companies, private companies, and then they can pay those RMT workers, drivers, guards and other staff who are on strike. Then, yes, you would get an immediate growth uptick, but you might get a lot more inflation. If the government has to borrow lots of money in order to make those payments, then you might get another squall on the bond market like we had after the mini-budget. Yeah. So none of this is easy. Economics is not easy, particularly when growth is falling.
And what when they're talking about inflation, they're talking about inflation becoming embedded. And that's not just the government, it's the Bank of England as well, because obviously if you put that cash back into the system too quickly, it really stokes things up too much.
When we were lads, we had the winter discontent mark in the late 1970s. What we had then was a wage price spiral. So wages go up, that means inflation goes up because that's firms' costs. That's because the government has to spend more money on those wages in the public sector. Then you get inflation going up. Then you get wages going up more. It becomes an endless increasing spiral. That's how inflation can get up to 25%, as it was in the 70s. It feels bad enough at 9, 10, 11%. Imagine if inflation was double, you'd have even less investment.
And let's remind people that the only weapon they've got to actually try and cope with that is monetary policy, interest rate policy, which could push stuff up.
And we get an inflation number on Wednesday, Mark, this week. I suspect it will be slightly less than the 11.1% we have at the moment. I think it will be near a 9 or 10%, but don't hold me to that. And then the day after, on Thursday, we'll get an interest rate rise. And here's a tiny little bit of good news. Up until very recently, everyone was expecting, or most people were expecting, another really big 75 basis point increase like we had last time.
As well. Yeah.
It may now be 0.5%, 50 basis points, with the Bank of England slightly easing away from these big interest rate rises because it's sensing, not least because the economy is slowing, that inflation, the end may be in sight.
Last thought, we've talked about the oil price. Lots of fluctuations going on. We were hoping that it might start coming down. We saw petrol prices coming down at the forecourt, but it's starting to stoke up again. I gather there's a problem with a pipeline out in States and Canada there's a huge amount of geopolitics and logistics impacting the oil market at the moment. Just last weekend, OPEC Plus, that's the oil exporting cartel plus Russia, they decided to defy the Western world again by maintaining their production cuts. The world economy is slowing, Mark. That suggests that oil prices should come down. And yet, the Chinese, they've obviously been clamping down zero COVID. They're now easing those the clamp down because of all the protests. That means Chinese factories are going to reopen again. That means oil demand is going up. The markets had suspected that Chinese demand will be out for a long time. But people power, protest power in China, incredibly, is now forcing the hand of Xi's authoritarian government. And they want that oil at a time when the market's squeezing the production.
Market's squeezed. Now, suddenly you've got the world's biggest oil importer, which is China, the world's second biggest economy. Suddenly there's a lot more oil demand there than we thought. Even though the world economy is slowing, that Chinese demand coming on and the action of OPEC Plus is keeping oil prices firm.
Good and bad news, as ever. Liam, thank you for that. And, of course, we'll be reflecting later in the week as those other statistics come out. Coming up at this particular hour, we're getting more on the freezing cold weather. Mark White, yes, he's got the right name for today, is out and about for us. But let's take a short break now.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, welcome back to GB News Live. And, of course, we've just been updating you on that horrendous news coming out of Solihull that those 3 children have died after they fell into that lake yesterday, 4th still being treated in critical condition in hospital. Let's join our Home Affairs editor, Mark White, now. He's at Primrose Hill in North London. And, Mark, of course, lots of people enjoying the wintry scenes to a certain degree and getting the sleds out, but a reminder with what's happened in the Midlands about how dangerous conditions are as well. And even though these surfaces may look frozen, clearly you don't know how thick the ice can be.
No, I mean, this time of year always brings, of course, a great deal of fun, but the potential for tragedy as well, as we saw up there in Solihull, a terrible incident that unfolded, and one of a number of incidents that the emergency services have told us about involving these lakes that are frozen over. But, you know, we're not talking about sub-zero temperatures over many weeks where you can get a good thick covering on a lake. They're actually pretty thin layered, these ice coverings, and they just don't sustain the weight maybe of a younger child perhaps, but the more people that go on that ice, the more potential there is for something really catastrophic to go wrong, as we saw in Solihull yesterday. Where I am at the moment, Mark, is in North London in Primrose Hill. As I say, it's great up here. We've had the old, we've been to Aspen for our holidays brigade coming up with their skis and other sort of winter get-up that they've been enjoying out here to date. They've been sledging, building snowmen, and also sort of throwing snowballs at each other, the kind of things that you would just expect people to do to try to make the most of this weather. But it's been causing pretty horrendous chaos across the southeast, in particular around the M25 overnight for quite a few hours. Hundreds of drivers trapped on various sections of the M25 before the snow ploughs and the gritters could get to them to clear that main orbital motorway to get the traffic flowing again. And not just the M25, the M2, the M20, the M11, all badly affected, along with other sort of main routes in and around the southeast. And although temperatures, we're told, are above freezing at the moment, they certainly don't feel like it, and they will dip below freezing again this afternoon and this evening, and that, as you know, then brings with it the potential for ice, which is often a lot more dangerous because, unlike snow, you can't really see the ice in many circumstances, and that is clearly pretty dangerous if you're driving or even just walking on the pavements.
And of course, the issue being, Mark, that we've got these rail strikes for the rest of the week, so many people will have to get out on the roads to get to work and get about. And even though the snow may have stopped, as you were saying, the temperatures mean we've still got this problem of ice on plenty of main arterial routes.
Yes, indeed. And you mentioned the railways. Well, there's been quite a bit of disruption on railway networks in the southeast, as well as the engineers have been out carrying out the checks that they need to do any time you get sub-zero conditions. So that's had a knock-on effect on rail services.
I'm just going to interrupt you because we've got West Midlands Police, the news conference just starting on the 3 children who've died. We're just going to take you over to Solihull now to get the latest on that.
OK, are we ready? Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming here this afternoon to this press conference. My name is Superintendent Richard Harris. I'm going to read to you a short statement, and I will hand you over to my colleague from the fire service, who will also read a short statement, and then we will take some questions from yourselves. So first and foremost, on behalf of everybody in the community and on behalf of West Midlands Police, I would like to pass on our deepest sympathies at this time. The tragic circumstances yesterday afternoon, so close to Christmas time, and our sympathies with the families who have lost loved ones in this incident. I'd also like to say that we are supporting the families. We have specialist trained officers who are linking in with the families at this time to offer them as much support as we possibly can. We've also linked in with the local schools which the children attended within this area, and the schools are also offering support to any pupils who may wish to receive support at this awful time. Our officers were quick to respond at the scene yesterday afternoon, and having worked very closely with our colleagues from other emergency services, went into the lake itself to help rescue the children and to try and assist them as quickly as we possibly could. We've worked very closely with our colleagues in West Midlands Fire Service and also in West Midlands Ambulance Service, and this has been a real joint effort. It is incredibly sad that we do not have any better news for you today regarding yesterday afternoon's incident. That's all I have to say at this moment in time. I'm going to pass over to my colleague now from the Fire Service, and then we'll be open to take any questions.
Thank you, Richard. We are deeply saddened by the death of 3 boys who were rescued by our firefighters yesterday here at the lake in Solihull. The boys' deaths are a tragedy beyond words, and the thoughts and heartfelt sympathies of everyone here at West Midlands Fire Service are with their families, friends and the wider communities at this distressing time. Yesterday's incident is a stark reminder to us all of the dangers of open water, especially during the winter months. Frozen lakes, ponds, canals and reservoirs can look picturesque, but they can be lethal, and there are no greater warnings of this than yesterday's tragic events. We would ask parents and carers to remind their children of the dangers of ice and why they must keep off it. Please help us to avoid this from happening again. We will continue to work closely with our emergency service colleagues and provide any support that we can at the scene. Again, we extend our heartfelt sympathies to everyone who has been affected by the boys' deaths. Thank you.
Superintendent Tom Harmon from Sky News. Can you just
give us some information regarding the ongoing work here at the lake and whether or not there are further people unaccounted for?
So yesterday evening we had a number of different reports suggesting numbers of young people that may have been on the lake. Those reports don't match the children that were rescued from the lake yesterday. However, we have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress though that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing, but until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Josh Biltrap, LBC News. How long do you expect to be here without finding anything?
As long as it takes. We've got specialist crews and we've got specialist equipment that's in the water that allows us to see what's in the water, so we'll be here for as long as it takes until we're absolutely certain there is no one left.
Superintendent Ben Chapman from ITV News. Can you tell us any more about the three boys, about their relationship? Were they family? Were they friends? Can you tell us any more about them?
At this moment in time, at the family's request, we're not going to go into those details. We're working very closely with the family and supporting them, as you can imagine that we are. When the family are ready to release those details, then we'll let you know.
You keep referring to family. Are they from the same family?
I'm not going to be drawn on that one at this moment in time, thank you.
The condition of the other boys?
The other boy at the moment, he's still very poorly, and we'll keep you advised on his condition as it becomes clear to ourselves.
Still critical?
Yes.
Have you been in touch with St Anthony's School, which is closed today?
We have been in touch with the local schools, and again at the family's request we're not going to go into too much detail around names or the actual schools that the children went to.
St Anthony's? Okay.
I'm not going to make a comment on that one at this time. I'm sure you'll understand the family's wishes.
There are reports that one of the children went to rescue one whose leg had gone through the ice. Are you able to confirm that?
Again, at this moment in time, the families have asked us not to release any further details than what I'm able to provide you this morning, I'm afraid. As soon as the families are happy, we'll be able to release you some more information on that.
It's probably a stupid question, but how are the family?
The family, as you can imagine, absolutely devastated. Also at this time of year, it's on the run up to Christmas, so close to the event itself. Also adds to that tragedy, but as you can imagine, the families are absolutely devastated, which is why we're doing our very best to support the families, and obviously we're abiding by their requests at the moment as to how much information that the families want us to make available to the media. So we're doing everything we possibly can to support them, and I'm sure you'll understand that we are led by the family's wishes as to how much information that we can say at the moment.
We've seen footage that police officers initially went into the water to help pull the children out. Were there members of the public as well? And just how brave were those people who did that?
So, from my understanding is, yes, police officers did go into the water. They were joined by other members of the other emergency services. Some of the officers went in waist deep. One of my officers was trying to punch through the ice to actually rescue the children themselves. That officer, as a result of that, had some mild hypothermia yesterday. I'm pleased to say that he's now been released from hospital and he's absolutely fine. In relation to, and I'm sure again you'll understand, we're still trying to work through all the details that came into us last night. We've got quite a few witnesses that we need to speak to, and we're currently still working through that at the moment. I'd just like to take this opportunity just really to make an appeal that if anybody has any information or saw any events that took place yesterday afternoon leading up to this tragic incident, if they could go onto our West Midlands Police website, there are contact details on there on how to get in touch with us, and then officers will be in touch in due course. But we're still trying to piece together exactly what happened leading up to yesterday afternoon's events.
How your crews have been given the fire service you myself to go in? How are they? Have you heard the news today? How are they now doing? So, as I say, yesterday's incident is tragic, and everybody within the fire service community will feel that. They did everything they could under the circumstances to get into the water, to rescue the 4 boys, and to bring them out to the ambulance service so that they could receive treatment. But you will appreciate they are, deeply disappointed by the news that we've been told today.
It sounds like the response was quick, but inevitably it takes an amount of time for emergency services to get here. Can you give us an indication of how long the children were in the water?
At this moment in time, I don't have the answer to that question. The officers and other emergency services arrived as quickly as we were informed. At that time, the call which came into us was at 2:34 p.m, so it was in minutes with the report coming in that we arrived at the scene, but the exact time of the children exposed in the water, I don't have that information at this time.
Once you arrived on the scene, do you then know how long it took to actually locate them and get them out?
So for the fire service, we arrived on the scene quickly alongside our colleagues in the police and ambulance service. It is quite a large lake, and it did take some time in order to identify exactly where their point of entry was, but as soon as that was established, firefighters entered the water alongside colleagues and members of the public in order to try and rescue them as quickly as possible.
Because when you went in, I'm assuming you went in without for the police and fire safety equipment, just straight in.
The officers went straight in, yes. They were, without regard for their own safety, they entered the water in just their normal trousers and shoes, which is what I'm wearing today, so they went in dressed as I am.
And a very similar picture for the fire service. Our initial crews that arrived on scene made their way straight into the water in their normal firefighting kit, and then when the specialist water rescue teams came along, they entered the water with different levels of PPE.
Do you have any more information?
There are no injuries to firefighters that I've been made aware of.
Do you have any more information on the members of the public who apparently rushed in to help?
I don't at this time. We'll, as those details come through, we'll let you know, but at this moment in time, I'm sorry, I don't have that.
Was the child who survived the first one to be pulled out of the lake?
Not, again, at the family's request, I'm not going to go into actual details around the children themselves and the condition. But as soon as the family are happy for us to release that, we'll let you know.
The fourth child, is he being treated at Birmingham Children's Hospital?
I'm not, and again, as the family's request, we're not going to divulge which hospitals the children went to.
Do you know if the children were accompanied by an adult at the lake, or whether they were there unsupervised?
Again, at the family's request, I'm not going to release any further information around that until they're happy for us to release any further details.
There's no suggestion of any criminal investigation?
At the moment, we, from a policing perspective, our main concern is to support the families at this tragic time. We're not currently looking at any criminal investigation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It was a news conference with Superintendent Richard Harris from West Midlands Police and the firefighters there. Indications of the efforts that were made to rescue these children. Superintendent Harris indicating that the police officers had gone in their normal clothing. One officer trying to punch through the ice to get to the children. Firefighters also getting into the water in their normal clothing before the specialist recovery unit arrived. It had taken some time to establish their point of entry, but indications that the emergency services had been there within minutes of the alarm being raised and the call coming through, and a reaction, of course, both from police and the fire service, that they were deeply saddened by the death, a tragedy beyond words, said the firefighters, and a stark reminder of the dangers of open water at this time. It can look picturesque, said the fire brigade, but it can be lethal, and a pleas for parents to help this not to happen again. Indications that the fourth child, a 6-year-old, is still very poorly, said Superintendent Harris, in hospital. But as we were hearing, at the request of the families, no further details being given about the children. Let's return now and speak to Jack, our correspondent there, and pretty sobering details, Jack, but an indication of the, well, literally heroic efforts that both police and firefighters went through to get to these children.
Exactly, Mark. As you said, this was such an instant response from the emergency services, them stressing how quickly they got here, and we heard how quite literally police officers who are in no protective equipment at all for the kind of temperature that water was, literally just charging into the water, heroically punching the ice, is one of the phrases that was used to describe how one of the officers was trying to rescue the children. Even when fire services got here, we heard how they just went straight in to the water. It took them, we heard a little bit of time to find out the point of entry for those children under the ice, but once they'd found it, they worked quickly and tirelessly until they could get those 4 children out. And the heroic efforts, of course, the families wanting to keep a lot of the details of this understandably private for now, and they will, I'm sure, will release their own statements in due course as we find out more about this. And another point as well that I thought was interesting from that conference, that the fire service and the police service are going to continue searching this area just to make sure and confirm that those witness statements that we heard of other children possibly involved, that those children aren't somewhere still under the water, and they will continue this operation until they are certain and have other witnesses to make sure that they have the facts right.
Yeah, and Superintendent Richard Harris saying that will be as long as it takes, and also the fact they're asking for public information, that anyone who may have witnessed to come forward and give them a picture to try and establish how many people were there. And I guess given the circumstances of the size of the lake and how cold it is, this will actually be quite a long operation to actually check every part of the lake.
Yeah, exactly right. The West Midlands Police saying to go onto the West Midlands Police website and that appeal for information, that if you have anything, if you were here, if you're a witness to this event, if you saw anything leading up to this event, to contact them in order for them to be able to collect all the information so far for this. We know from hearing from the press conference this is not currently being treated as a criminal investigation, so they're just treating this in order right now to make sure that they can get as much of that lake searched as quickly as possible to possibly try and find other children if they were involved, but if not, just to make sure that the 4 children that have already been rescued, of course 3 sadly passing away, but they are the only 4 children that were involved in this incident. We heard about the 4th child who's still 6, who's 6 years old, still in hospital in a critical condition, and hopefully they can make a recovery. The officer who had hypothermia, we heard that he's now been released from hospital. That heroic officer was seen punching through the ice to try and rescue these children, but the operation here is going to continue for possibly the day and the next week to come to make sure that all of that lake is searched.
And Superintendent Harris indicating, and one can fail to imagine what's happening in terms of the parents. Absolutely devastated, they said, in the run-up to Christmas. We know that one school has closed as well. Indications perhaps there were pupils there, though the details being withheld. What are members of the local community doing then? I gather that many have been turning up with flowers and so on.
Yes, so a few members of the community turned up earlier on with some flowers. The community is really gathered here now around the press conference to listen to the answers from the police so far, and they're just coming together. Here, emergency services, us here in the media have all been brought food and sandwiches, the community coming together and just reflecting on this. This is a shock. The leader of Solihull Council saying that this is not a lake which usually people try to go in this kind of weather. You know, in the summer, it's a nature reserve. It's a beautiful spot that people like to come to. This is completely out of the ordinary for this area, and so this community is shocked. But as communities always do in these times of devastating news, they come together and they come together and support each other. Like you said, one local primary school closing for today, and there's going to be so many families in this area that will know these children. This is a close-knit community. There's so many people here that just know each other, you know, walk by each other on the street, see each other on dog walks, and they're all going to come together to support each other at, like you say, Christmas, a devastating time for these families to lose their boys.
Yeah, and a 4th little boy still critically ill in hospital, as you're saying. Jack, for the moment, thank you for that, and we'll be back to you, of course, with that search operation continuing at the lake. Well, let's break away to other matters now after what we've been hearing, and the latest trailer for the next 3 episodes of the Harry and Meghan Netflix docu-series has been released, and it looks as if the last 3 episodes may be far more controversial based on the material in this latest trailer. Let's have a look and listen. doesn't appear to be working, maybe because of the controversial material inside. Who knows? Well, let's speak to our royal correspondent Cameron Walker joining us here in the studio. So shocking that it won't play in our system.
No.
And clearly the palaces, both Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace, will be girding themselves waiting for this. Although the indications had been that for the previous episodes, no one had actually sat down and watched them.
Yes, well, if we look at the first 3 episodes, which were released on Thursday, it got up to the point of wedding in 2018. So this final 3 episodes, which are going to be released on Thursday, is going to talk about Harry and Meghan's decision to step back as working members of the royal family, moved to California. So it's all of that, those bombshell revelations to do with the Sussex summits, the negotiations with the other members of the royal family, the issue of security. And from this trailer, it's pretty clear this is going to be a lot more incendiary than perhaps the first 3 episodes were. There's one particular quote, which I'm just going to read to you because it's very important. It says, this is Prince Harry, "They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us."
Right. I think we can play it now. I think we've got that. Just bear with us and we'll just play this in. It's just arrived with us.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Victims once again, it seems. That's the storyline.
Victims once again. Now, from first looking at this trailer and that particular line about willing to lie to protect my brother, the question is, who is they in this context?
And lying about what?
And lying about what? Many people perhaps would jump to the conclusion that it was the institution or the British royal family even. Clearly, from the trailer, we don't get any context on that. But there is a difference here, which I believe we have a screenshot of, between what was released on Twitter just 10 minutes ago and what the subtitles read, and what's been released on Netflix websites themselves. Now, what I mean by that is on Twitter, it quotes Prince Harry saying they were willing to lie to us. On Netflix, the subtitles read the British media were willing to lie to protect Prince William.
And all of this is significant because of the variance, if you like, between what some people say is established fact and what's being claimed in these documentaries. And we have, for instance, in terms of the previous clips that we've seen, shots showing paparazzi from completely different occasions than was associated with both Harry and Meghan. Therefore, the veracity of what is being said is under scrutiny.
Exactly. It certainly weakens the arguments from the first lot of trailers that were released when they were using pictures of paparazzi, which had absolutely nothing to do with Harry and Meghan. There's clearly 2 sides to every story, and I think we can't really question the fact that Harry and Meghan genuinely believe what they feel. But clearly there is an issue here where we're only getting a half-truth, because we know that Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace are not going to be responding to this trailer, or at least that's the official line. I can imagine if there's a particularly damaging trailer allegation, then they may well respond.
Right. I think we've got this graphic now. That's what we were showing first of all. So this is... So
we're going to have to get rid of the strap so we can read the subtitles. But this particular
British media are happy to lie to protect my brother.
Yes, and that is not what Prince Harry says. Prince Harry says they were willing to lie to protect my brother. A very small point, but clearly in this Netflix trailer, it is giving more context. Right. But that's not actually what Prince Harry said.
And just to touch on that, on the release of these last 3 episodes, which you had to sit through in a very comfy cinema seat.
Yes.
However, there was immediately a challenge from the royal household with the Netflix claim at the beginning. The slate said, you know, we've contacted the royal households for comment. They have declined to do so. And then we had the response saying, no, actually, we weren't contacted for comment, even though there was some phone call, I think, to Kensington Palace from a production company.
Yeah, it was a very small point. From my understanding, an email was sent to both Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace from a third-party production company, which was unverified. So Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, from my understanding, both contacted Archewell Productions, which is Harry and Meghan's media arm of their company, and Netflix themselves to try and verify this unsolicited email address. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, from my understanding, did not receive a response from either Archewell or Netflix, so therefore did not respond to this production company. Then, of course, this slate comes on saying that members of the royal family were unwilling to comment on the documentary. So clearly the royal household is disputing it, but Netflix is saying they were contacted.
Prince William has kept his counsel on these first 3 episodes. Will he do so given what seems to be a direct challenge just from what we saw on screen there?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty hard for Prince William this week. I mean, clearly this is just a trailer, but that trailer has already released an extra bombshell, hasn't it? Yeah. The Queen set a precedent following the Oprah interview of 2021 when Meghan accused an unnamed member of the royal family of racism. Harry accused Clarence House of financially cutting him off, which was denied, etc. But the Queen released a statement saying that recollections may vary. That was a precedent. So I think if there is particularly damaging allegations, which this new trailer very much alludes to, it would not surprise me if there is some kind of comment from Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace.
Push back was the phrase that was used, I think, wasn't it, originally? So we shall see. Cameron, thank you for bringing us that breaking news, and we shall see what the response... This is going out later this week again?
Thursday, final 3 episodes on Thursday from 8 a.m.
Back in your cinema seat.
Yes, I will be.
Now, let's reflect on plans for military staff and civil servants to cover for striking border force staff at airports and ports. Amongst the contingency measures expected to be discussed at a Cobra meeting today, the government confirming military personnel and civil servants being trained to help cope with the planned strikes, including nurses, paramedics, rail workers and, of course, those border force officials. Let's get more with our political correspondent. Tom is joining us there outside a very snowy scene in Downing Street with, a bit of a frosty reception, it seems, for all these claims on pay. They're holding firm there.
They certainly are. The government is sticking by its line, which is it's accepted the independent pay review body's recommendation for pay rises. Now, these are pay rises that come in under inflation, but of course that is the case that we're seeing across the private sector and much of the rest of the economy as well. So the government's line is that it's accepted these independent pay review bodies' recommendations for below inflation pay rises, and that to pay double-digit pay rises to these striking sectors would cost somewhere in the region of £1,000 per household, per tax-paying household. And the government says it would embed inflation, which is due, as things currently stand, to fall sharply in the first part of next year. Now, on the side of the unions, they say that this is a simple matter of fairness, that in real terms people are seeing their pay cut as prices rise at a faster rate than pay is rising. So they are, in some cases, asking for pay to match inflation, in some cases asking pay to go much further than inflation. Nurses asking for pay rises in the region of 19%, far ahead above where inflation is. And it does seem that there are these just two almost intractable positions here. The government wanting to avoid doing anything that might embed inflation in the medium to long term, and these unions representing their workforces, which are asking in many cases to keep their pay where it is, and some asking for a real terms rise as well. So where is this leading us? Well, it's leading us to a winter, perhaps a winter of discontent, as some are describing it in the media, where sector after sector choose to strike, whether it's those working in the railways, whether it's those working on the border force, whether it's those in the NHS, nurses, ambulance drivers, paramedics, all the rest of it. We are seeing a really tricky period over this Christmas period. We're seeing the next few weeks going to be a real challenge just for logistics in this country. And that's what this Cobra meeting this afternoon is all about.
Tom, thank you very much indeed for that. And, of course, we'll see what emerges from that Cobra meeting in terms of those preparations for the army and the civil servants. For the moment, thanks very much. But let's move to a sunnier scene. The World Cup still on, and after England's quarter-final exit at the hands of the French, questions being asked, of course, about Gareth Southgate and whether he'll stay on. Well, speaking after the game, he said he would review and reflect before deciding whether to carry on. But now he's saying he's conflicted about his future, having found large parts of the last 18 months difficult. Let's get the latest from Doha and our reporter there, Paul Hawkins. Paul, clearly things are sort of sinking in a bit for him.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a period of, as he said after the game, Mark, it's a period now of reflection, and he needs to work out what he wants to do, because he said that he found large parts of the last 18 months very difficult and that he was conflicted about his future. And what he means by that is, OK, England played well against France and they went out in the quarterfinals, which was technically a worse result than the previous World Cup, but they did play well against the world champions. But before that, they drew 3 and lost 3 and were relegated from their Nations League group. So there was a lot of criticism around him then. The crowd at the time, they were beaten 4-0 by Hungary, chanting, "You don't know what you're doing," and probably he's referring to those moments when he talks about difficult periods. He's been boss since 2016, so we're 6 years into his tenure now, so it's understandable why he would have doubts about the future. But most England fans you speak to said they do want to stick with him, they do want him to stay on as England manager. Remember, he's won 6 knockout games in the past 6 years. That's as many as England won in the previous 48 years before he became manager. So that's why England fans want to stick with him. The FA will be hoping to convince him. There are 1 or 2 voices saying perhaps the FA should move Gareth Southgate up to board level and then look for a new manager. But the majority consensus is, look, we want to stick with Gareth Southgate as England manager. The team, of course, left yesterday, and you might have seen a few pictures about Dave the Cat. He's also on his way home. Dave the Cat, who's been adopted by the England team, who was at their Al Wakra hotel. But certainly in terms of the football action here, people are looking forward to the semi-final tomorrow. Argentina taking on Croatia. Lionel Messi's quest to become a World Cup winner against Croatia, who, you know, small side, through to their second successive World Cup semi-final. And then, of course, on Wednesday, you've got the big one, Morocco against France.
And all the flags still flying high there. Paul, as ever, thanks for updating us in Doha. Latest on the World Cup, of course, throughout the afternoon. But also coming up, we'll be reflecting on that news from Solihull, with 3 children having died after falling through the ice. An emergency operation still continuing there to establish if there are any more people still under the ice. Don't go anywhere. We'll have all the latest for you after this break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. 3 boys have died after being pulled from an icy lake in Solihull on Sunday afternoon. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11, were in cardiac arrest when they came out of the water at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. One police officer was treated for hypothermia after trying to punch through the ice to reach the children. They were taken to hospital but have since been released. The West Midlands Fire Service says the search of the lake is continuing to establish if anyone else fell into the water.
We are deeply saddened by the death of 3 boys who were rescued by our firefighters yesterday here at the lake in Solihull. The boys' deaths are a tragedy beyond words, and the thoughts and heartfelt sympathies of everyone here at West Midlands Fire Service are with their families, friends and the wider communities at this distressing time. Frozen lakes, ponds, canals and reservoirs can look picturesque, but they can be lethal. And there are no greater warnings of this than yesterday's tragic events.
Yellow warnings of ice, fog and snow are still in place for much of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. It was the coldest night of the year so far, reaching below minus 15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties have been felt in the east and south of England. There are still significant delays across the rail network, with southeastern trains telling people not to travel. Gatwick and Stansted have reopened after closing their runways on Sunday, leading to the cancellation of more than 100 flights. Weather journalist Nathan Rao gave GB News his advice to drivers.
Going on long car journeys when this is going on is not a good idea. If you do have to do essential journeys, make sure you're prepared, because if your car breaks down, remember that it will get cold in the car. You'll not be able to heat it. So take blankets, take hot drinks, make sure you're prepared. Try and avoid long journeys. I know it's difficult because the trains are on strike all this week and the airports are in chaos. But be prepared. If you're in your car overnight in these temperatures, you need to be ready for it.
Britain's economy grew between September and October. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show a 0.5% increase in GDP in the month. However, it has still shrunk over the last 3 months. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the numbers underline the government's failure to grow the economy. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has warned there's a tough road ahead.
These figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
The Foreign Secretary has vowed to forge new partnerships beyond the UK's traditional allies. In his first key speech in the role, James Cleverly celebrated Britain's traditional alliances, but promised to build relations with influential Asian, Latin American and African countries. He said he'll make a long-term effort to maintain old friendships and build new ones beyond the UK's allies.
In the coming decades, an ever greater share of the world economy, and therefore the world's power, will be in the hands of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That reality has been evident for some time, but I am not convinced that British diplomacy has fully caught up. My goal is to build on the work of my predecessors and ensure that we do catch up. And under me, that task has begun.
Meanwhile, the International Trade Secretary will arrive in India later as the UK strives to restore a free trade deal. Kemi Badenoch will meet Indian ministers and business leaders in New Delhi for the first formal round of talks since July. The negotiations are expected to focus on cutting tariffs and opportunities for UK financial and legal services. The government is still in the process of negotiating a free trade agreement after the target of securing a deal by October was missed. The second trailer of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's docu-series has been released, with the couple accusing the British media of lying to protect Harry's brother. The documentary features the couple's first-hand account, personal archive videos and interviews with friends, which were all filmed before the Queen's death. The final 3 episodes will be released on Thursday.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, it's back to Mark.
Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. So those 3 boys aged 8, 10 and 11 have died after being pulled from the ice and that lake in Solihull yesterday. It's thought they were playing on the surface before they fell through. One 6-year-old boy still in a critical condition in hospital. West Midlands Fire Service have now switched from what they say is a search and rescue to a recovery operation at Babs Mill Park. Emergency crews originally having been told there were 6 children playing on the ice. And the police say the search will continue for as long as it takes until they're certain no one else is in the water. Let's get more with our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who's still at the scene. And Jack, underlying, even though they've not had any reports of any further children unaccounted for, they're continuing to search the lake just to be absolutely sure.
Yes, that's right. The police working through those countless witness statements that they've had so far about exactly what happened here at that point of that incident. They said they received the call at 2:34 p.m. and then within minutes there were officers here at the scene. One police officer literally just jumping in heroically, along with reported members of the public, punching through the ice to try and get to these 4 children. But you're right, they are continuing the search to make sure that those witness statements that have come in, they can prove them to either be wrong or correct. Obviously, this community hoping here that the 4 boys that were rescued are the only ones that were involved in this incident, and there are no more devastating shocks to come from this site. But like you say, as long as it takes the West Midlands Police saying they will keep searching this lake, and that could go on for days because of the sheer size of it and the sheer, of course, logistical problems with the constant freezing weather here. The community, though, is currently starting to come together. You might just be able to see over my shoulder some flowers by a tree. That's where members of the public in the community here are starting to come together. Lots of very upset people because this is such a close-knit community. The fact is, a lot of people here would have known the poor 3 boys that have been involved and sadly passed away.
Yeah, and Superintendent Richard Harris saying that obviously the family's absolutely devastated, the phrase he used, and at their request, details being withheld about the children's identity, but also an indication about the heroic efforts that those police and firefighters went through to get to the children. One police officer dressed just in normal kit, punching his way through the ice to get to them.
Exactly right. Described as almost barehanded, no gloves, no PPE at all, just running into that lake in his normal trousers, normal shoes. Even the fire service, when they got here, just literally minutes after the police did, and as they started to collaborate their efforts, they didn't wait until those specialist diver crews came with the specialist equipment. They just went into the lake to try and find and get these 4 children out of it. Members of the public as well. There's been some members of the community here that remember the incident yesterday, saying that some had seen them on the ice and were questioning why they were on the ice. One reports that their son had shouted at these children to get off the ice. It was then that one of their feet fell through the ice. Their friends that were on the bank went into the water, and then suddenly all 4 of them were in trouble. And those members of the public nearby, the police that arrived here on the scenes just a minute after that call at 2:34 p.m, just going in heroically. One of those police officers suffering with mild hypothermia was taken to hospital last night. They've now been released and are expected to make a full recovery.
Yes, and we've still got the other little 6-year-old boy in critical condition in hospital. An indication again about the the really awful conditions. And police now want anyone who may have witnessed what was going on to get in touch with them so they can piece together, particularly after these initial reports of 6 children being seen there.
Exactly. This is one of the things. They've had so many witness statements come in. The police just now want to work out the facts of actually what happened here. They're not treating this as a criminal investigation at all. They just want anybody with any information that may have been witness to this event, witnessing leading up to the event, possibly, you know, half an hour before, if they'd seen how many children were around the lake at the time. They just want to know any information they can so they can be absolutely sure of how many people were involved in this incident, so they can know whether they need to keep searching or not. You can go to the West Midlands Police website. There is ways and links there for you to be able to put in your information as well. Crime Stoppers as well. And there are so many countless ways for members of the public that if you have any information, the West Midlands Police saying, just help us out and help us with this investigation, because it could take days to really come to terms with and find out the circumstances of exactly what went on here.
Yeah, indeed. Jack, thank you very much for updating us there at the scene, and just to reiterate that warning too from the fire brigade in that news conference to remind children and of course and the parents of the dangers of ice and open water at this time of year. Now let's move on to other matters, with the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt warning that the UK economy will get worse before things get better. Latest figures revealing that the economy shrank further between August and October. However, it did grow for 1 month by 0.5% between September and October, according to the Office for National Statistics. The recent increase down to more spending at the time of the Queen's funeral, that unplanned bank holiday, of course, you remember. But that might only be temporary, with economists predicting we're on course for that recession by the end of the year. 2 subsequent quarters, of course, of negative growth. Well, as the figures were being announced, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said the economy will get worse before things recover. Let's remind ourselves of what he said.
Well, these figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
Let's get more with Victoria Scholar joining us once more, Head of Investments at Interactive Investor. Victoria, as ever, thank you for running us through the figures. A bit of good news and bad news. First, I guess we ought to acknowledge the bad news. It's still a downward trend and heading perhaps for this recession, as we were saying. That's 2 quarters of negative growth back to back.
Yeah, it does look as though a recession is still very much on the cards, and we're looking at potentially the longest recession since records began back in the 1920s, so lasting throughout the whole of 2023 and into 2024. But like you say, it was a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the report. We saw a pickup in October of 0.5%, which was ahead of analysts' expectations, and swinging from a decline of 0.6% in September, which was negatively impacted by the extra bank holiday day for the Queen's funeral. And we saw strength in October from the services sector, thanks to, in particular, car and motorbike repairs, because we know that car sales have been on the decline with the cost of living crisis and the threat of the recession, which is squeezing household budgets, but then that's boosting repair services. Also, we saw that human health services was performing well. That's because of the government's booster program, which is trying to encourage people to go out and get their vaccines for COVID. So we saw more demand in terms of health services there. But like you say, to put it into broader context, the 3 monthly figures were actually a decline. So we are still seeing a deteriorating economic outlook.
Yeah, I think construction was up as well, which is interesting. I mean, are there actually indications that perhaps we are able to recover once things do get better, that there is still a bit of resilience in the economy?
Yeah, I think construction, again, was another bright spot. We saw the 4th consecutive increase that helped contribute to a rise in GDP for October. I think the biggest economic challenge that we're facing right now is inflation.
I think we've just lost the signal from Victoria. Victoria, we're just going to try and re-establish. We've just lost you for a moment. Yeah, you're back. We just froze, but you were just saying about inflation. Of course, this is particularly important because this is what's being used by the government and Jeremy Hunt in particular to argue against these pay increases being awarded.
Yes, absolutely. I think that inflation is really the big economic problem that we're facing right now. That's why we've got the cost of living crisis. It means that everything's going up from food to fuel to energy. And it's why wages are struggling to outpace inflation. And that, like you say, is creating a lot of uncertainty in the labour market, causing industrial action and strikes. So I think the key is to get inflation back down under control towards 2%, which is the Bank of England's target, where it believes that price levels are stable and we can have confidence in our economy. From that point is where we need to then think about growing our economy. So I think once we can get a hold on price levels, then there could be some resilience starting to come back.
OK, and then last thought, this is obviously called the golden quarter, where particularly the service industry and pubs and restaurants really make up for the rest of the year. Given we've got this weather, given we've got all the strikes, I mean, are economists thinking that really this is going to be not too healthy in the lead up to Christmas?
Yeah, of course, this is a critically important period seasonally around Christmas, when we tend to see a boost for the retail sector, of course, with extra shopping, and also pubs and restaurants tend to get a boost as well with Christmas parties. But unfortunately, we've seen a lot of those parties have been cancelled because of the strikes. So it does feel as though that boost, although we may get it, will probably be a bit smaller than previous years. But, you know, we are coming out of the pandemic. There's also the argument that people might want to enjoy their Christmas this year, having not been able to do so in recent years.
And make the best of it, indeed. Victoria, thank you for that. Apologies for the break-up in the signal, what we got there. Thanks for your analysis, as ever. Now, let's reflect on the latest in the Migrant story, with so far fewer than 100 of those who crossed the Channel being arrested for arriving illegally in the UK under the new powers deterring them. That represents 0.3%, we're told, of those who've crossed since the law changed. Well, under the Nationality and Borders Act, passed earlier this year, it created that new offence of knowingly arriving without permission. Let's get more now with our Refugee and Asylum Rights Director at Amnesty International, Steve Valdez-Simons, joining us once more. Doesn't appear to have really done the trick yet, then.
Well, I'm not sure what the trick is supposed to be. I mean, the government clearly wants to see less people claiming asylum in this country. It's not going to achieve that particular trick, given the fact that this country receives relatively few people into its system as compared to other countries. In fact, the trick, if you like, that it might achieve, which would be truly dreadful, is more people coming to this country who don't enter our asylum system but go to ground because they are just terrified of all the things the government is saying it's going to do to them, despite the fact that it can't do most of these things to all of these people, which would be truly atrociously expensive as well as harmful. And it's always just a few people who get singled out to be treated often in wholly inappropriate and harmful ways.
Yeah, but you will know that this was introduced to try and tackle the criminal gangs and the people smugglers who are obviously guilty of moving people across in a non way where this phrase "knowingly arriving without permission" is clearly accepted by them.
Well, we're told that that is why it was introduced. That's what ministers keep saying, but that doesn't really make any sense, does it? These powers, like so many of the powers that were brought in, don't tackle smugglers. They tackle the victims of smugglers, the very people supposedly government is concerned about because they're making journeys that are dangerous to them. Actually, if we're interested in the people who are exploited by smugglers, which is not good for those people, not good for us, we would be working with the French in this particular instance to ensure that everybody can get safely into an asylum system, and that would have to include many of these people doing so on this side of the channel. Yeah. We're not doing any of that.
And is that what Amnesty International sees as the gaps to this still lack of international coordination of that? Because, of course, not just France, the suggestion is that it goes over into Eastern Europe with the organised crime gangs from there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we can see this all over the world, if we like. There are dangerous journeys like this being made in all sorts of places. And I'm afraid nations don't cooperate largely for the purpose of ensuring people's safety. They cooperate to the extent that they do to simply trying to push people back and leave responsibility somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's not doing anything for people's safety. It's not undermining at all the huge business that smugglers and human traffickers are engaged in. And it's really costing an awful lot of money to do an awful lot of harm.
Indeed so. Steve Valdez-Simons, as ever, thank you for bringing us the view there from Amnesty International UK, and we'll keep assessing the numbers, of course, and what happens to those people when they arrive here. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching GB News Live, and ministers holding that emergency Cobra meeting with the latest wave of strikes on their way. We'll see what they may decide. Before that, let's update you on the weather.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. The wintry weather continues this week. Icy conditions, still a bit of snow in places, but not a huge amount for most. Freezing fog is a more widespread issue. There's low pressure systems surrounding the UK, but actually not a lot going on for most areas. So, as I say, we're not going to see too many snow showers. The main exception to that will be Shetland, where we will continue to see snow showers coming in. 1 or 2 wintry showers for western parts of Scotland, the east of Northern Ireland. The odd flurry still across the southeast, but mostly it's all about the thick and freezing fog over central and eastern parts of England. Some quite poor visibilities in places. And, of course, where we've had snow, it could turn icy. Temperatures struggling to get much above freezing, particularly where it's foggy, but some sunny spells down to the southwest. If we do get above freezing, quite quickly this evening, temperatures will drop back down below freezing. There will still be some freezing fog around, particularly over parts of the Midlands and northern England, but actually clearer conditions coming into the southeast. Again, though, where we've had any snow or where we continue to see the odd shower, it could be icy with temperatures dropping below freezing, well below across Scotland, -15 in some places, maybe as low as -10 across the borders as well. Tomorrow, again, most places just dry and cold. Not as much fog around, but likely to stay quite grey over parts of northern England. Still some snow showers coming in over the Northern Isles. The breeze picking up down to the southwest. Quite a lot of high cloud here. And again, temperatures struggling to get much above freezing. Feeling colder as the wind picks up. But actually, temperatures getting up to 6 or 7 in the southwest late in the day. As this next feature comes in, that is worth keeping an eye on, because that could bring some wet weather into the southwest, hitting the cold air, the potential for a little bit of snow for parts of Devon and Cornwall. So we need to keep our eyes on that. At the same time, further wintry showers coming in across the north and the east. So it is a wintry week, some fog around and further snow and ice to come over the next few days.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Well, welcome back. An emergency Cobra meeting being held today over the latest strikes, with ministers discussing using the military and civil servants to cover staff shortages, especially in the border force. But the government also saying armed forces to be drafted in to help the NHS when ambulance staff go on strike next week. Let's get the latest now with our political reporter, Catherine Forster, who's outside Downing Street. And getting the indication from Oliver Dowden, Catherine, who's chairing these meetings, talking about a robust approach. They're really sort of starting to dig in on all of this.
Yes, they are. I was at the lobby briefing in the last hour or so, and the Prime Minister's spokesman was saying very firmly a line that we're hearing over and over again, that the government has accepted all the recommendations from the independent pay review bodies on public sector pay, and they feel clearly that they have done their bit. Now, of course, many of those awards were given before inflation hit over 10%, so they are now effectively real terms cuts in many cases. But yes, contingency planning going on. Oliver Dowden, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Minister for the Cabinet Office, has been coordinating these throughout, and not Rishi Sunak, who will be on a G7 call. So in the next hour or two, there will be a Cobra meeting with the Home Office, Home Secretary, Transport Secretary, the Defence Department and the Health Secretary, working out the specifics. We understand that there will be up to 1,000 military personnel brought in to assist with border force, because of course they are striking, and also in helping paramedics and driving ambulances potentially. Now, I understand that they're not allowed to drive blue light calls, so flashing sirens, going through red lights, etc.
Yeah.
But they will be basically taking some of the less urgent calls. We were asking if potentially lives could be lost as a result of these paramedic strikes. And of course, the Prime Minister's spokesman wouldn't be drawn, but did say that there would be very, very significant disruption this week. So a very difficult time for the government. They don't want to up their pay awards because they don't want to embed inflation. They say that it would cost every household an additional £1,000. They say inflation is going to be half what it is now, hopefully, by the middle of next year. But difficult times for people, bills rocketing, pay falling in real terms, and people trying to go about their normal business may struggle this week. And worst of all, if you need an ambulance, you can't guarantee necessarily that it will be there for you.
Yeah, and in particular, I mean, the Army indicating they may only be able to cover 10% of the cover, for instance, given that they've got limited manpower as well. But it seems that attitudes are hardening. We've got the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who's been on a visit to the Lister Hospital in Stevenage with Sir Keir Starmer, calling of a betrayal of patients with a reckless and appalling stance on strikes taken by the government, and calling Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary's approach, a complete joke.
Yes, well, Labour obviously very keen to capitalise on the chaos which seems to be enveloping the country as these strikes begin. I would say I was at a health event last Thursday, and Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary, did say then very clearly that a Labour government would not be able to give the nurses 19% that they are, of course, asking for either, but that certainly they would talk. Now, Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, has said that his door is open, that he's happy to talk to the nursing unions, but that what he is not prepared to do is talk about the specifics of pay. And pay is not the only issue by any means, but certainly a fundamental sticking point. So we really do seem to be at a stalemate, and the much talked about legislation to restrict strikes certainly doesn't look like coming in this side of Christmas, so won't be of any help to preventing these strikes in the immediate future.
Catherine, thank you very much indeed. The snow dusting the Christmas tree there, but a frosty atmosphere perhaps inside number 10. And indeed, snow and ice hitting many across Britain still, causing travel disruption, including flight and train cancellations. We'll have more on that and the weather in detail coming up after a news update.
Good afternoon, it's 1:30. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom with the latest. 3 boys have died after being pulled from an icy lake in Solihull on Sunday afternoon. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled out of the water at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. 1 police officer was treated for mild hypothermia after trying to punch through the ice to reach the children. They were taken to hospital but have since been released. The West Midlands Fire Service says the search of the lake is continuing to establish if anyone else had fallen into the water.
Those reports don't match the children that were rescued from the lake yesterday. However, we have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing, but until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Yellow warnings of ice, fog and snow are still in place for much of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. It was the coldest night of the year so far, reaching below -15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties have been felt in the east and south of England. There are still significant delays across the rail network, with southeastern trains telling people not to travel. Gatwick and Stansted have reopened after closing their runways on Sunday, leading to the cancellation of more than 100 flights. The second trailer of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's docu-series has been released, with the couple accusing the British media of lying to protect Prince William. The documentary features the couple's first-hand account, personal archive videos and interviews with friends, which were all filmed before the Queen's death. The final 3 episodes will be released on Thursday. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to GB News, and the weather still causing disruption across many parts of the country. Many regions seeing between 5 and 10 centimetres of snowfall. Well, the Met Office still has yellow warnings for ice, fog and snow in place. And last night, the coldest night of the year, the coldest indeed since February 2021. Temperatures down to minus 15.7 Celsius, we're told, in Braemar in Scotland. Well, it forced airports to close with runways being de-iced. Train services also suffering delays. But it's meant some pretty picturesque scenes with your pictures coming in. This is Karine and her picture of dog Alfie enjoying the snow in the garden with Alfie's friend as well joining it, I think. Meanwhile, this is Alison's picture of the Cambrian Mountains in Wales, minus 7 Celsius there. But a splendid scene. Yvette and her dog Fred going for a walk in the snow. Fred with his coat on, very sensible. Pamela with this and her now white garden and a grey sky in the distance as well. Let's join the superbly named Mark White at Primrose Hill in North London for us now in another wintry scene. However, Mark, we ought to reflect, despite all the lovely picturesque scenes that we're seeing, that there is obviously danger there, bearing in mind what we've seen in Solihull. And the warning still now be going out to parents and children not to go near any open water or any sort of surface that they think might be ice and getting into trouble as a result.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing the emergency services want to do is put a dampener on those people that want to get out and enjoy the likes of this fairly significant snowfall for the south of England. It's covered much of the southeast, and here in Primrose Hill they've been out in force on their sledges and making snowmen and throwing snowballs and all the things, all the fun that you enjoy. But there's a difference obviously between this and then heading out onto lakes and ponds onto the ice there, because the fact is, you know, we don't get sub-zero temperatures for weeks on end. It can build a significant thickness of ice on these lakes and ponds, and that means it just can't really take much weight at all. So it's very risky for anybody to go out onto the ice, and that's what the police and emergency services are warning people to avoid. And of course, just taking care generally. We're seeing people going up and down Primrose Hill here very gingerly, because the pavement is slippy, as is the roadway. And what will happen, of course, within an hour or two's time, it feels like it's sub-zero already, but it's not. It's about 1 or 2 Celsius, and the snow has actually been melting here throughout the morning. But as we get into the late afternoon, as the sun falls, then we're going to get freezing temperatures again, Mark, and that will bring ice on the pavements, on the roads, and make it much more treacherous going for people.
And of course, we've got this position of the rail strike going ahead this week, so many people will be trying to take to the roads to get to places and to get to work particularly. So therefore, these warnings are very apt. And questions really again about how robust our transport network is, not just on the roads, but rail and air as well.
Yeah, I mean, we always get these questions at this time of year when something like this happens, when you have a snow event or a major ice event, and claims that the local authorities are not as prepared as they should be. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, for those in the south who don't experience conditions like this day in, day out, it's probably, you know, understandable that they are not diverting huge resources for a contingency that is very rarely called into place. When it does happen, it's obviously disruptive, but it's different further north, of course, in the north of England and in Scotland, where they deal with adverse weather much more regularly. You will see that the road networks there are well maintained because those crews have that as a significant part of their winter schedule. But further south, it's just not the case, and we, I'm afraid, have to put up with it. But what it does bring is chaos for those who are not used to it further south, and of course it brings lots of amusement to our viewers who are further north, who see us struggling to cope with something that they look upon as just nothing to get at all excited about.
Well said as a Scotsman on Primrose Hill. Mark, as ever, thank you very much indeed for joining us and updating us there. Let's bring you some sad news coming through from Press Association, reporting the death of the writer, broadcaster and satirist Victor Lewis-Smith, who's died at the age of 65 after a short illness. That statement being issued by his public relations agent saying he died in Bruges in Belgium on Saturday. So very sad news. Victor Lewis-Smith dying at the age of 65 after a short illness. Tributes, no doubt, will be coming in soon on that. Now, let's head to Cornwall from Primrose Hill. It's to benefit from a £360 million devolution deal under new government plans. It would require local consent, though, and parliamentary approval, but should give the county a locally elected mayor and a greater say over transport budgets, buildings and several other areas. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has the details for us.
Try telling a Cornishman they're part of England. You'll get the same sneer as if you put cream first on your cream tea. The Cornish say they're a separate people in a separate land, and it's about time those powers of separation were made official. Enter the government, keen to steal a march on Labour's devolution plans, tethering devolution to their own plans for levelling up. And they've got a big idea for the South West, so they've sent Levelling Up Minister Deanna Davison down to the Duchy to explain.
Well, it includes a whole range of things. The first is a directly elected mayor so that the Cornish people can choose who leads them into negotiations right around the country with government internationally to attract new investment.
Investment worth £360 million. The government is offering money for adult education, money for brownfield regeneration, money for Cornish heritage. But there's a catch. If the Cornish want the cash, they'll need to sign up to a mayor too. And that's a layer of bureaucracy many would rather avoid, like Councillor Zoe Fox, Mayor of Camborne.
We have a social care crisis and a cost of living crisis. It's going to hit businesses as well as people. And there are just better things than imposing a 5-year term of a mayor, basically to take charge of the council when people have elected their local councillors to speak up for them.
It's an issue that's dividing opinion west of the border with Devon, that is. Some are questioning the government's motives. There's no such thing as free cash.
I would like to know what it would mean for Cornwall. Why all of a sudden now have they decided to talk about bringing a mayor into Cornwall? Why? Is there an ulterior motive to this?
Others say, why not?
I think it's worked for most regions where they have instigated a mayorship. So I think historically it's done quite well, and if this population's large enough or the county's large enough, I guess it does warrant one. So
the council is in consultation on whether to hold a referendum to let the Cornish decide. This debate isn't just about the politics, it's about identity too. It goes to the heart of issues that have been raised in Cornwall for centuries. Who are the Cornish? Where do they come from? And where do they want to be?
I think all this England stuff, part of England now, we're not. We could be independent and be happy. Why? We're just so, well, we've got farming, fishing.
There are few who believe independence would be easy, but that's not stopping them trying. The question now, will an elected mayor with devolved powers satiate their desire for full independence, or will it ignite the flames of separation? Jeff Moody, GB News.
With some splendid seagull sound effects, took us right down to the Cornish coast there. Now, let's head back to the States with a trailer for the final 3 episodes of the Harry and Meghan Netflix docu-series being released. It seems that these final 3 episodes may be far more controversial based on the latest trailer. Let's take a look and listen.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
So happy to lie to protect my brother, fed to the wolves, the latest claims. Let's speak once more to royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams, who, of course, Richard, saw the first 3 series or programmes in that particular series. It looks as if the sting may be in the tail.
The sting most certainly is, but this trailer, and you showed part of it, is absolutely extraordinary because they say in it, I quote, security was being pulled, everyone in the world knew where we were. That sounds, or appears to sound, that perhaps even their lives might be in danger. And then Meghan says that I wasn't just thrown to the wolves, I was fed to the wolves. And then Harry said they were willing to lie to protect my brother, but were not to tell the truth to protect us. Who exactly are they? It goes a great deal further than the media, which was the target of a lot of the first series. This clearly must refer, I can only assume it does, to the courtiers. But if they make it's extremely serious what they're saying, and
yeah.
I mean, it is bizarre. I can only use that word. What else could it mean? That deliberately there is some sort of plot to silence them in some way?
And clearly the King and Prince William kept their counsel after the first 3 programmes were released. One wonders whether this time something might have to be said to actually challenge the claims.
You are absolutely right, and these claims are positively toxic if you take them literally. But the problem is the royal family have a very serious dilemma. You can't possibly reply point by point to something, especially after some of the charges in the first series, and also the issue dealing with the Commonwealth, which was made out to be Britain's empire Mark 2.0, which is absolute rubbish, i.e. that the British were using the Commonwealth for commercial purposes, or words to that effect. Then you're going to get a series of far more personal claims, it would appear. How could they possibly respond with a statement? Perhaps the Queen did it, with some recollections may vary, also, will they get an invitation to the coronation? What contact will there be with them? I mean, the whole thing has just become something of a media circus.
Which was obviously what they were trying to avoid. And therein lies the importance, too, of these final 3 programmes, because it covers their flight from the UK to the US. And we do remember at the time they were talking about trying to establish privacy and to lead a new life. And, of course, that now being called into question with all this publicity over the series itself.
Well, the series was made by Netflix from 15 hours that they were given. Now, when it comes to privacy, of course, they control to some extent, or they are obsessed with controlling what is said about them, what is written about them. On Oprah, they accused the palace of being in cahoots with some of those who were against them and also not doing enough to protect them. The point is that it will stick, and the problem is this program will go worldwide. Now, if security was being pulled, now that is a very, very serious charge. So they really, the extent of claiming something like that, what is the evidence? What is the proof?
And, of course, the fact that it can be challenged as well. But let's reflect perhaps on rather happier matters, at least for the royal household, because the Christmas card has been released by the King and the Queen Consort, showing them at the Braemar Games. And we reflect sort of bittersweet, if you like, because it was just a few days before the Queen's death, the Queen Elizabeth's death.
Indeed, yes, and it was clearly chosen as a tribute to the Queen, who would have, had her mobility issues permitted, been at the Braemar Games. They were always a highlight of her sojourn at Balmoral, and this echoes it. And it also reminds us that this Christmas, the royal family, a family like any other family, even if it is our first family, will be grieving for the loss of the Queen. And to put up before Christmas with this, what I can only describe as an eternally weird circus which the Sussexes have set up, and then subsequently, almost directly afterwards, having Harry's memoir Spare foisted on them on the 10th of January. It's an extraordinary, a funny old world, as Margaret Thatcher once said.
Indeed, amongst other things. Richard, thank you very much indeed for that. And we'll perhaps catch up with you on Thursday if you can bear to sit through another 3 episodes, of course. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, the first parole hearing is to be held in public today after the rules changed in July of this year. Previously, those hearings always private, held in prisons as well, with very limited access. Well, today is for murderer Russell Causley, handed a life sentence for killing his wife Carol Packman in 1985. He's never revealed the location of her body, as he tried to fake his own death too as part of an insurance scam to avoid the police. Freed from prison in 2020 after serving 23 years. However, he breached his licence conditions and was placed back in prison in November last year. Let's speak now to Donna Jones, Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire. Donna, thank you very much indeed for your time. Is this part of the process of justice not being just being done, but being seen to be done as well?
Yeah, well, I think this has come from a number of poor decisions which the public perceive as poor decisions made by parole boards over recent times. We saw earlier this year the mother of baby P, Tracy Connolly, who was released with 22 conditions attached to her parole. Now, if somebody is at that much risk of committing harm to the public or to children, that they need to have 22 conditions to keep the public safe, you could argue, and I came on GB News at the time and argued that perhaps that wasn't the right thing for the parole board to do. Now, actually, the government took umbrage at that decision around Tracy Connolly. She was since recalled, she was then released again on parole, and I understand she's now back in prison again. But this really is about the government's commitment to making justice more transparent, to becoming, to being tough on criminals, making sure, for example, that people who commit serious, violent and sexual offences are no longer entitled to apply for parole 50% of the way through their sentence. And I very much welcome that. And I do welcome the same as that first murder case, the sentencing of that murder case that was televised. And now, as I say, we've today got the first televised parole board hearing. And I think it's good for the public because they can now see what is taken into consideration when people are making those decisions.
Yeah. Is there a danger, however, and this was an argument, of course, over the whole issue of actually televising court proceedings as well, it becomes sensationalised then when the details are released?
Well, perhaps there is that risk, yes, and I do think that is a key case, and particularly probably in the first 6 to 12 months, and when you have high-profile offenders, I'm sure, yes, I agree that there is a risk that we could be sensationalising it. But actually, as time goes on, we've seen in America, for example, where they have been televising criminal justice procedures for years, that it does then start to become the norm. But if you are a family member, a loved one of somebody who was affected, killed, seriously injured or detrimented by that particular offender, by that criminal, and you therefore now will be able to have all of the information that the parole board are taking into consideration before and whilst they're making that decision. And for me, as I say, that's a really welcome thing. And as the national lead for victims across England and Wales, today is a good day for me. It's a landmark day.
OK, and last thought, could it also concentrate the mind of the parole board themselves, knowing that all these details are going to be made public?
Undoubtedly. It's human nature. If you know that you have got 65, 66 million people scrutinising your decision, I think it undoubtedly brings that. But that's the whole point of living in a democracy. That's the whole point of us living in an open and transparent society, and as taxpayers being able to have a right to the information that our government are charged with and making those decisions on our behalf. So from my perspective, if it brings greater scrutiny, that is also a good thing.
Donna, thanks for that. It looks as if you're joining us from Southampton, which looks snow-free behind you, which is good news at least. So
it is freezing. It's very cold indeed.
Cold, but clear. Thank you very much indeed for your time here on GB News once more. Well, coming up, not so clear elsewhere. We'll have all the latest for you on the weather front. Details for you coming up now.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. The wintry weather continues this week. Icy conditions, still a bit of snow in places, but not a huge amount for most. Freezing fog is a more widespread issue. There's low pressure systems surrounding the UK, but actually not a lot going on for most areas. So, as I say, we're not going to see too many snow showers. The main exception to that will be Shetland, where we will continue to see snow showers coming in. 1 or 2 wintry showers for western parts of Scotland, the east of Northern Ireland. The odd flurry still across the southeast, but mostly it's all about the thick and freezing fog over central and eastern parts of England. Some quite poor visibilities in places. And, of course, where we've had snow, it could turn icy. Temperatures struggling to get much above freezing, particularly where it's foggy, but some sunny spells down to the southwest. If we do get above freezing quite quickly this evening, temperatures will drop back down below freezing. There will still be some freezing fog around, particularly over parts of the Midlands and northern England, but actually clearer conditions coming into the southeast. Again, though, where we've had any snow or where we continue to see the odd shower, it could be icy with temperatures dropping below freezing, well below across Scotland, -15 in some places, maybe as low as -10 across the borders as well. Tomorrow, again, most places just dry and cold. Not as much fog around, but likely to stay quite grey over parts of northern England. Still some snow showers coming in over the Northern Isles. The breeze picking up down to the southwest. Quite a lot of high cloud here. And again, temperatures struggling to get much above freezing. Feeling colder as the wind picks up. But actually, temperatures getting up to 6 or 7 in the southwest late in the day as this next feature comes in. That is worth keeping an eye on because that could bring some wet weather into the southwest, hitting the cold air, the potential for a little bit of snow for parts of Devon and Cornwall. So we need to keep our eyes on that. At the same time, further wintry showers coming in across the north and the east. So it is a wintry week, some fog around and further snow and ice to come over the next few days.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's just gone 2. You're watching GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst, and coming up this hour, we'll have the latest from Solihull, where police have now confirmed 3 boys have died after falling into a frozen lake there. We'll talk through the dangers of freezing conditions with a GP. The crisis hit NHS, bracing itself for its first ever nursing strike. There's a Cobra meeting going on with the government, while Labour's called the government approach an absolute joke. We'll have the very latest from Westminster and the views too of a union leader. Is it a rare glimmer of good news? The economy growing by 0.5% for the past month. Liam's with us to read the tea leaves. But are we still heading for recession at the end of this year? And send us your pictures of the snow where you are. Email us as ever, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and let us know how you're coping with the freezing conditions. But now the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. It's 1 minute past 2. 3 boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull on Sunday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11, were in cardiac arrest when they came out of the water at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. 1 police officer was treated for hypothermia after trying to punch through the ice to reach the children. They were taken to hospital but have since been released. The West Midlands Fire Service says the search of the lake is continuing to establish if anyone else fell into the water.
We have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing, but until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Yellow warnings of ice, fog and snow are still in place for much of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. It was the coldest night of the year, reaching below minus 15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties have been felt in the east and south of England. There are still significant delays across the rail network, with southeastern trains telling people not to travel. Gatwick and Stansted have reopened after closing their runways on Sunday, leading to the cancellation of more than 100 flights. Weather journalist Nathan Rao gave GB News his advice to drivers. Sorry, we haven't got Nathan there. We'll get him for you later on. In other news, Britain's economy grew between September and October. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show a 0.5% increase in GDP in the month. However, it has still shrunk over the last 3 months. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the numbers underline the government's failure to grow the economy. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has warned there's a tough road ahead.
These figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
The Foreign Secretary has vowed to forge new partnerships beyond the UK's traditional allies. In his first key speech in the role, James Cleverly celebrated Britain's traditional alliances, but promised to build relations with influential Asian, Latin American and African countries. He said he'll make a long-term effort to maintain old friendships and build new ones beyond the UK's allies.
In the coming decades, an ever greater share of the world economy, and therefore the world's power, will be in the hands of countries in Asia, Africa and Latin America. That reality has been evident for some time, but I am not convinced that British diplomacy has fully caught up. My goal is to build on the work of my predecessors and ensure that we do catch up. And under me, that task has begun.
Meanwhile, the International Trade Secretary will arrive in India later as the UK strives to restore a free trade deal. Kemi Badenoch will meet Indian ministers and business leaders in New Delhi for the first formal round of talks since July. The negotiations are expected to focus on cutting tariffs and opportunities for UK financial and legal services. The government is still in the process of negotiating a free trade agreement with India after the target of securing a deal by October was missed. The second trailer of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's docu-series has been released, with Prince Harry accusing people of lying to protect his brother. It's not clear who he's referring to. He was also heard saying that he wondered what would have happened if he hadn't left the royal family when he did. The trailer for the latest 3 episodes, which will be released on Thursday, has been unveiled after the first set was released last week.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Mark.
Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring you some breaking news we're getting on this strike situation. And one of Margaret Thatcher's former ministers, Lord Baker, who was Education Secretary under Margaret Thatcher, has said that the government should be agreeing to a compromise 6 to 7% pay deal with striking unions. He said that Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, should be speaking to nurses. I hope there might be some movement, he said, towards a settlement around 6 or 7%. That's the way to go, quite frankly, because protracted strikes in the public sector are going to hurt a lot of people one way or another and reduce services available. It's certainly in the interest of the government. They should try and resolve this reasonably, sensibly and reasonably quickly. More reaction to that as it comes through. Of course, we've heard there's been a Cobra meeting going on in Downing Street to assess what they do to bolster all these various public services during the strike action. Now let's return to that news about the 3 boys aged 8, 10 and 11 who died after falling through the ice on that frozen lake in the West Midlands. Another 6-year-old child said to be still very poorly in hospital. Well, emergency services are warning people to stay away from any open water after the tragic accident at Babs Mill Lake in Solihull. Let's get the latest with our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson, who's still at the scene. And Jack, just to update people, there is still an operation going on there because police can't say for certain whether there may still be people in the water, given what eyewitnesses have said at the time.
Exactly. So this is all part of the same investigation here from the West Midlands Police. They've had quite a lot of witness statements coming into them, all with slightly differing angles, differing stories of what people have seen. So they are still continuing this operation. It was initially last night a search and rescue operation. That's now been changed to a recovery operation. And a while ago we saw a boat out with members of the fire service and police in the boat, still looking. We're hearing that they've got a thermal imaging camera going through the water in order to try and scour this lake. It is a huge lake here. It may not look it, and many people, when they came last night and were witnesses to this, unaware of how big this lake actually is. And so there's a lot of lakes still to cover that this operation will be ongoing for the next few days. But the Superintendent Richard Harris, who's leading the police part of this investigation, saying that they will not stop and they'll do everything as much as they can to continue this operation and use those witness statements to make sure that they've got their facts right. They're still appealing for people to come forward with information, to go to the West Midlands Police website, that if you were a witness, not even to the actual event itself, but even had maybe seen the boys that have now sadly passed away in the area on the same day, to give them any information of how many people actually might have been involved in this incident. That is the main thing that the police are now looking for. This, though currently, is not a criminal investigation, but that operation, like you said, still ongoing to try and see if there are any more people that have sadly not been found yet.
And details from Superintendent Harris at that news conference about the efforts made by both the police and firefighters to recover these boys. We were being told that police officers just dressed in ordinary uniform, punching through the ice to try to get to the boys.
Exactly. So the emergency services received the call at around 2:34 p.m. we heard, and within minutes there was a police officer here on the scene, along with members of the public in his normal just trousers, boots, normal police uniform, without any further protective equipment, just stormed into the lake, stormed into the ice to try and rescue these boys. One witness saw them punching through the ice with their bare hands. That police officer was taken to hospital last night and was treated for mild hypothermia. They've now thankfully been released and are on the road to recovery. We're not really too sure about the condition of members of the public that witnesses saw go into the ice, but even when fire crews got here, just even mere seconds and minutes after the police arrived, even they, before the specialist divers got here, just ran into the water to try and start this operation. We heard from the fire service at the press conference that it took them a little bit of time to identify where the crack in the ice that had fallen through was, but once they had found it, they put all of their resources as quickly as they could to getting those children out and hang them over to the ambulance services, who then performed CPR here at the scene before the boys were taken away to hospital. Of course, 3 of them unfortunately passing away, an 11, 10 and 8-year-old, a 6-year-old still critically ill, we now hear in hospital.
Yeah, Jack, thank you very much indeed for joining us there at Solihull, as you're saying, as local members of the community too, paying their tributes and bringing flowers and reflecting, of course, on these dangers of these conditions at the moment. Well, let's speak now to Dr. Lynn Thomas, who's medical director at St John's Ambulance Service. Lynn, thank you very much indeed for your time. We were just hearing there about the efforts that both those firefighters and police had gone through to try to get to the boys, and clearly time of the essence. What should members of the public do in these circumstances, do you think?
Obviously, it's an incredibly tragic time for everybody, particularly our thoughts are with the family, but it is everybody's instinct to go out and to try and help and to try and get in the water, but you're making yourself a potential other casualty. So please, first things first, dial 999, get the experts to come and help. If you see somebody going in the water, see if you can throw them a device. There might be a life ring. It might be just a really long branch that you can push out to somebody to try and get them to grab hold of it so that you can try and pull them back out the water. Sometimes lying flat on your belly, not going all the way onto the ice, because you don't want, as I say, to become a casualty yourself.
Yeah.
You can get further reach on it so that you can try and help.
Yeah, because, of course, if you make yourself a casualty, it adds difficulties for the emergency services once they do reach the scene. But then, given what we heard about these boys who went into cardiac arrest, an indication of just how cold the water is, do you then try, if you're there first at the scene, to give any kind of CPR? What is the watchword? I know it's Dr. ABC, danger, response, airway, breathing, circulation.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. The most important thing is to start CPR. In children, it's really important if you know how to do it.
We seem
if
to
you
have
don't
lost...
know how to do
Lynn, I'm sorry, we just lost you for a second there, the signal. You were just saying what we should be doing once we get there in terms of approaching it medically.
So if in a child, the most important thing is for you to try and do rescue breaths. So that's where you blow in and put some air into the lungs. But if you don't know how to do it, please start chest compression. But again, dial 999 first, put your phone on speakerphone, and the call handler will help you. They'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Really important. Try and get somebody to get some warm blankets to get over the casualty so that they're warm.
And should you be trying to turn them on their side as well before you give the CPR, in case they have swallowed water, to actually get the water out? I mean, people are a bit confused about that.
Yeah, no, you don't want to do that. If they're in cardiac arrest, if they're not breathing normally, just start by doing 2 rescue breaths, blow into the lungs if you can. Again, if you don't know how to do it, please start chest compressions. They're really simple and everybody can do it.
Yeah, and what's the advice for parents, mums and dads and other people to get the training to do this? I mean, are there sort of evening classes and things that you can go to with St John Ambulance to get expert advice?
Absolutely. There's lots of resources out there. So if you go onto our website, sga.org.uk, you'll see where the nearest places are for you to do courses. There's also some really useful advice on social media. You can look at some YouTube videos. There's an app that's free to download that you can give you the information. Always best to be prepared.
Yeah.
Ideally, I'd love everybody to do a face-to-face course, but at least if you've looked at a video, you'll know what to do if you are confronted with such a horrific incident.
Indeed. And, of course, the watchword, don't go anywhere near open water in these circumstances and try to get onto the ice. But thank you for your advice, Dr Lynn Thomas, Medical Director at St John Ambulance Service. Thank you. And, of course, we'll update you as we get more from Solihull on that operation continuing there. Now, an emergency Cobra meeting's been scheduled to start within this hour over the latest strikes and, indeed, what the government will do to provide cover. The TUC now warning workers are being pushed to breaking point. Well, the minister is expected to discuss using the military and civil servants to cover for staff shortages in the border force and also in the NHS, with ambulance staff on strike next week. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting asked about the situation earlier today.
Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary's reaction to the strikes has been a complete joke. To say that he's willing to talk to the RCN about everything other than the issue they want to talk about, that's not serious. It's not taking RCN and Unison up on their, I think, reasonable offer to sit down and just talk about pay. If the government was willing to talk this week, there would be no strikes this week. And so if strikes go ahead, with all of the disruption we know that patients will suffer, patients will be blaming Conservative ministers, not the poor nurses who just want a fair hearing.
That was Wes Streeting. Let's speak now to our political reporter, Catherine Forster, who's still outside. Well, I think you moved now elsewhere in Westminster, and clearly the weather not helping things. But, Catherine, not just the voices from Labour, but now former cabinet ministers of Margaret Thatcher, no less, Lord Baker, saying that this is really perhaps the time that they do need to sit down and talk about a settlement around 6 to 7%, he was saying.
Yes, he has waded into this and suggested that the government really does have to move. The government have been defending themselves on the grounds that they have accepted the recommendations of the pay review bodies, but many of those were made before inflation reached over 10%. And so clearly the nurses are not going to be awarded 19%. The government has been adamant on that, and also Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, has also said today that a Labour government wouldn't be able to afford that either. But perhaps there is some middle ground between the current offering and inflation. Of course, the Royal College of Nursing offered at the weekend to suspend the nurses' strikes if Health Secretary Steve Barclay sat down with them to talk about pay. He said he's happy to meet with them, but he will not discuss pay. And so at the moment, it looks like the strikes are on. Now, I'm here at the Cabinet Office. There will be a Cobra meeting in the next hour or two. The Home Department, the Defence Department, Transport Department, health officials will all be meeting to talk through the logistics, the damage limitation measures, if you like, that the government are putting in place now to try to mitigate some of the worst impacts of these strikes. Probably around up to 1,000 military personnel being drafted in to help border force officials, to help potentially driving ambulances, though I understand they won't be able to drive the blue light calls where the ambulance lights are flashing and skipping red lights, etc. The government spokesman admitted that it is going to have a severe impact. The paramedic strikes in particular wouldn't be drawn on lives being lost, of course, but a really desperate situation as this week many strikes are set to begin, and this really does just feel like the beginning of an incredibly difficult winter. Difficult for the government, difficult for the people going on strikes who can no doubt ill afford to lose the money, and difficult for us trying to go about our business, and especially worrying for anybody who might need an ambulance or might need nursing care over the next weeks.
Indeed. And have we got any indication from the Prime Minister's spokesman why the Prime Minister is not chairing this, and it's Oliver Dowden, the Cabinet Secretary?
Yes, well, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is due to have a remote conference call at 3 o'clock this afternoon with other members of the G7 to discuss the situation in Ukraine. But the Prime Minister's spokesman was keen to stress in any event that the contingency planning for the strikes had been led throughout by Oliver Dowden, who is Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and also Cabinet Office Minister. It has been specifically his job, and so we shall see. More information will be no doubt emerge. There's some things that are still not clear. There's going to be civil servants also being involved. We don't know the numbers. We don't know exactly what departments they may be brought from or into. Also, we don't know the specifics of the types of calls that ambulances will still cover. They'll certainly cover Category 1, which is basically immediate threat to life if somebody's had a heart attack and stopped breathing. But Category 2, that could be strokes or suspected heart attacks, which are still very urgent. Yeah. That is still far from clear. And in terms of elderly people falling over, which is Category 3, again, very worrying indeed.
Catherine, at the Cabinet Office, thank you for that. Back to you, of course, as we get more from that Cobra meeting. Well, Catherine was referring there about that G7 call on Ukraine. Coming up, Ukrainian forces saying they've struck one of the headquarters of Russia's Wagner mercenary group. Also, operations resuming, we're told, at the Black Sea port of Odessa. We'll have the latest with the former president of Ukraine coming up after this break, and weather.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. The cold theme will continue throughout this week. Further issues with icy conditions in places and a few snow flurries, although most will stay dry. There are low pressure systems surrounding the UK, but actually across the country at the moment, not much in the way of rain, sleet or snow falling, except across northern Scotland. Heavy snow at the moment across parts of Shetland, and that wintry weather will sink south towards the mainland as we go through the night. Ice is the biggest concern across the southeast, where we had snow last night, melting a little through the day and then refreezing as temperatures drop down widely below freezing. Also, fog continues to be a problem across parts of the Midlands and northern England, thickening up again in some zones here. So murky conditions here to start Tuesday, still potentially icy across the southeast, and snow showers coming in across northern Scotland initially, but then through the day coming down into parts of southeast Scotland and perhaps northeast England too. For many, it is going to be a dry day on Tuesday, turning brighter through the day across the Midlands, northern England, although some will stay murky. And where it does, temperatures not going to get much above freezing. Even with a bit of brightness, we're only looking at highs of 3 or 4 for most. And then down to the southwest, a little weather system arriving. That potentially could bring some snow across the southwest for a time during Tuesday night. Some uncertainty about how far it gets in and therefore how much snow we get. Likely to be rain across much of the Channel Isles. So staying damp here, but elsewhere it's generally another dry day on Wednesday, but more snow showers coming in across northern Scotland and across parts of southeast Scotland and northeast England. For many, it's a sunny day on Wednesday, but it will be cold once more. Temperatures, again, struggling to get much above freezing, maybe 3 or 4 across parts of the south. The cold theme will continue throughout the rest of this week, and there are warnings in place to cover the ice and the snow. Check out the Met Office website for more details on that.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Now, Ukrainian forces say they've managed to strike one of the headquarters of Russia's Wagner mercenary group. It's thought to have been stationed at a hotel in the Luhansk area, which was hit with major losses, we're told. Wagner, the state-sponsored fighters who act on the orders of the Kremlin. But fighting has also been raging in southern Ukraine over the weekend, Russia targeting Odessa, but indications that they've now been able to resume operations at that Black Sea port, so important, of course, for the grain exports. Well, today, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly gave a speech outlining the future of the UK's foreign policy, touching on the issue of the war in Ukraine, saying that President Putin was trying to turn back time to the 19th century.
Consider for a moment the alternative world that Vladimir Putin yearns for. The reason why his onslaught against Ukraine offends every fibre of my being is not simply that it's morally abhorrent, although, of course, it is. And it has nothing to do with the accident of geography that Putin is waging his war in Europe. No. What really chills the blood is that he is prepared to destroy the laws that protect every nation and, by extension, every person across the globe. Putin's goal is to turn back the clock to an era when might was right and big countries treat their neighbours as prey. He is waging a 19th century war of imperial conquest, deliberately debasing international conduct, utterly contemptuous of today's values.
Remarks of the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and his thoughts. Well, let's get the thoughts now. Former President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, joining us once more from Ukraine. Mr. Poroshenko, thanks for your time here on GB News once more. Just to update people on the news that we're getting, that Odessa may have resumed operations. You managed to reopen the port. So important, of course, for your grain exports.
First of all, today is the 292nd day of the Putin's three-day war. And definitely the attack of Putin on the object of critical energy infrastructure is now throughout the country. Lviv and Kiev, Odessa and Nikolaev is suffered from them, but we are very much fighting for that. And I definitely can confirm that the energy supply to Odessa port is renewed. And we work hard to renew the energy supply to the whole territory of the Odessa region, who is now suffered the most from the Russian missiles attack. I want to tell you and confirm that I'm just speaking with our team members who is now fighting in the assault brigade, that there is very heavy fighting near Bakhmut, and I can confirm that the successful missile attack is happening against Wagner Group, who is a real terrorist, and we definitely expecting that our partners will recognize Wagner as a terroristic organization, and that's opened the door for recognizing Russia as a sponsor of the terrorism.
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about, because in the year 2014, Wagner Group was among the dozens of thousands Russian soldiers who is attacking Donbass 9 years ago.
Yeah, and of course the point being made that the Wagner Group then under, it seems, the direct control of the Kremlin and orders of the military commanders as a sort of terrorist government outfit, as you say. But they've also been responsible for getting these Iranian drones in action, which have caused you so many problems with hitting the energy infrastructure. Does your assault mean that maybe you can actually limit that threat now?
First of all, this is not true that this assault using Iranian drones is limited because of the cold weather. This is not true. And we now is a witness that the massive attack using the cruise missiles and Iranian drones is still the object of Ukraine is every day. And this is definitely the very dangerous union between Russia and Iran for attacking Ukraine, and this is definitely danger for the whole world. And together with the Iranian drone, they're using the cruise missile. And I want to remind you that this is the missiles X-55, and I doubt that everybody understands that we give it to Russia as Ukraine. Under the condition of the Budapest Memorandum. That's part of that is Ukrainian missiles when Ukraine received the security guarantee from the whole world. And now these missiles returning back to us. And with that situation, definitely, this is direct connection with the Kremlin. This is direct responsibility of Putin. And the Prigozhin, who is a Wagner commander, his right hand of Putin visited him the most often. And that's why this is the responsibility of the top Kremlin criminals, including Putin. And we should work hard for create a tribunal for put Putin behind the bars in The Hague.
And the direct consequence, as people have said, that he's weaponized the weather, if you like, that those armaments have been targeting your energy infrastructure. How is that coping at the moment? How are you able to get power to people in these various regions?
I'm now in Kiev. I'm just returned from the regions. And in Kiev now there is no electricity. Light you have here, it's just based on the generator to have a possibility that the Sky News viewer can see the direct TV from the Kiev. And with that situation, I think that the whole Ukraine now is suffering from that, together with artillery fire We returned from the Kherson a few days ago, and right now the artillery and mortar fire from the left bank of the Dnieper River killing civilians. 2 civilians and 5 killed and 5 is wounded just several hours ago. And this is the situation when Kherson do not have a heating, do not have electricity, do not have a fresh water, and people are living in a disastrous condition because Russia is opening the fire from the left bank of the river. And this is the situation throughout Ukraine. And again, how we can stop them with the closest way to the peace is more weapons to Ukraine. We have, day before yesterday, very successful attack of Ukrainian armed forces in Melitopol. And on the distance, about 90 kilometers, we have completely destroyed the Russian headquarters on the occupied Melitopol. Today, we have a great success in Lugansk using the long range. And that's why we are waiting for the long range artillery, high accuracy, long range missile. And this is the key, the way to our victory, and this is the only way how we can deputinize Europe, deputinize the world.
Petro Poroshenko, former president of Ukraine, thank you very much for joining us live in Kyiv and updating us on the situation. We appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
And we'll update you, of course, as we get more, as we will on the situation ahead of the ambulance staff strikes. First, let's get a news update with Tamsin.
Mark, thank you. It's 2:34. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 3 boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull on Sunday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled from the water at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. 1 police officer was treated for mild hypothermia after trying to punch through the ice to reach the children. They were taken to hospital but have since been released. The West Midlands Fire Service says the search of the lake is continuing to establish if anyone else has fallen into the water.
Those reports don't match the children that were rescued from the lake yesterday. However, we have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing. But until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Warnings of ice, fog and snow are still in place for much of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. It was the coldest night of the year on Sunday, reaching below -15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties have been felt in the east and south of England. There are still significant delays across the rail network, with southeastern trains warning people not to travel. Gatwick and Stansted have reopened after closing their runways on Sunday, leading to the cancellation of more than 100 flights. The second trailer of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's docu-series has been released, with the couple accusing the British media of lying to protect Prince William. The documentary features personal archive videos and interviews with friends, which were all filmed before the Queen's death. The final 3 episodes will be released on Thursday. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Now let's update you on the strike picture. Of course, a Cobra meeting going on at the Cabinet Office as we speak to discuss a situation with the Army and civil servants being brought in as potential cover. Meanwhile, more than 1,600 workers at the West Midlands, North West and North East Ambulance Service Trust striking, we're told, on Wednesday, the 21st of December. Unite saying that the action is a stark warning to the government. It must act to stem the crisis engulfing the NHS. In other strike news, more than 500 workers at the housing charity Shelter now going on strike until December the 18th. Let's get more now with One Kassab, who's National Lead Officer for the Unite Union. One, thank you for joining us once more. It does seem the government's digging in with this Cobra meeting going on today, where they're discussing what they say is a robust response to all this.
Good afternoon, and a pleasure to be on again. We would reiterate that rather than a robust response, what is necessary is negotiation. And just to show our good faith, you only have to look across the border to Scotland, where our representatives there, with health workers, are negotiating with the Scottish Government about a pay agreement in Scotland, and we are relatively hopeful that we can get to an agreement. So it can be done, and the proof is in the eating. We've shown that we're willing to negotiate, and we now need the same from the government.
Yeah, and indeed the nurses having achieved a deal north of the border as well. I just wonder what you made of this intervention by Lord Baker. Lord Baker Dorking, Education Secretary, of course, under Margaret Thatcher, indicating he thinks that protracted strikes in the public sector are going to hurt a lot of people and reduce services available.
I think the fact that he recognises how serious the situation is at least one stage beyond where the government is at, who just seem to be sticking their heads in the sand in ostrich fashion. The reality is that we are taking limited action at the moment. It is sending a message. We are willing to negotiate. The impact of these strikes don't need to take place. That is the reality. And I think we have to recognise that where we're at is trade unions saying, just sit down and negotiate with us and talk to us. And for years, that's been the problem in the NHS.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that the pay review body is not fit for purpose. and negotiations do not take place.
Right.
Let's change that. Let's start talking.
I was going to put that to you. Clearly, the government's position is that they believe there is this independent pay review body that has established what is fair and equitable, but the unions don't accept that.
Unite don't. No, because the pay review body is not a negotiation. And we've had this debate with our reps and our members recently. The way the process works is you get to put evidence to the body, it makes recommendations, and then the government decides whether it's going to implement them or not. That's not negotiation. And the reality is it's not working. If you look at the recommendation it's made, if you look at the timing, if you look at where we are now with inflation, it's not working. It's clearly not fit for purpose. What we need to do now is, in reality, scrap that system and start negotiating, just like what's happening in Scotland.
One Kassab, National Lead Officer for Unite, thank you very much indeed. And, of course, we'll see what emerges from that Cobra meeting with the government as well this afternoon. Thanks for your time. Now, let's just reflect that we've got the cold weather conditions continuing with the alerts still in place. Many regions having seen up to 10 centimetres of snowfall. I think we've got a picture here of the snow blanket in Kent across Tunbridge, showing how extensive it is. I think most of the South East train service is at a halt today. And it's pretty, but it's not so great if you've got to try and get from A to B or indeed cope with conditions if you're out and about. The yellow warnings for ice, fog and snow still in place. Last night, the coldest night of the year since February 2021, minus 15.7 Celsius in parts of Scotland. Let's speak to someone who knows Scotland very well in a minute, as we just see a few more pictures. This is Kath sending us a picture of the canal, which appears to have been frozen over, and that warning, don't go anywhere near open water or try and get on the ice for obvious reasons. David in Hartlepool, his street covered in that blanket of snow. John with the neighbourhoods of London, with the trees covered in a frosting of snow and, of course, frost and ice as well. How about Primrose Hill in North London? A man who is usually used to the icy wastes of Scotland, Mark White, joining us there. Mark, you were saying that even though the temperature is not quite below freezing, it feels a lot colder than it shows on the thermometer.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I never used to bother at all about the winters when I was further north in Scotland, but 22 years down in London, I've become a real southern softie, I have to say, and it does feel sub-zero here today. And actually, the light's starting to fade now, so within an hour or so, we're probably going to be heading towards darkness, and we know that with that will come the sub-zero temperatures proper. So all of the snow that's been melting throughout the day will turn to ice, and that's going to make it treacherous underfoot for those walking on the pavements, but also, of course, for the road users. And we've had multiple accidents reported throughout the day. There's lots of videos, should you care to amuse yourself, on social media of drivers who just can't cope with the snow and drive to those conditions, and instead they are just crashing into each other all across the south of the country. Not serious, of course, if these accidents are more significant in nature. We know that on the M25 last night, Mark, there were drivers who were caught out in that for many hours in some circumstances before the snowplows and the gritters could get to them and clear up that motorway again, the orbital motorway, and allow the free flow of traffic. And the reason, of course, is simply we get caught on the hop because it isn't a kind of weather that we're used to that often now in the south. So resources to any significant degree aren't really ploughed, if you'll pardon the pun, towards those snow clearing operations, whereas of course further north in the north of England and Scotland they are, because they deal with this kind of weather much more regularly.
Of course, we've got the problem about everything refreezing tonight in tomorrow, and that's when everyone will be hitting the roads because of the train strikes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a pleasant time at all if you're a commuter throughout this week. Already today, Southeastern trains have experienced significant disruption. There was checks that took place first thing in the morning for the sub-zero temperatures and the potential problems that was causing to the network. They've been cancelling lots of their services and advising people not to travel. Well, as you say, we then get into the strike period for the train services. The airports have also been disrupted, with runways at Stansted and Gatwick closed for a while. Knock-on effects there that are still being felt. And this pattern really of melting snow, then refreezing at night, is something we're being told we should expect for quite a few days in this week before eventually things will start to warm up again.
Thank you very much indeed for updating us there on a pretty but cold scene on Primrose Hill, and we'll let you get back to your sled. Thank you very much. Now, the UK economy will get worse before it gets better, so said Chancellor Jeremy Hunt this morning. It follows signs of Britain heading into recession. Now, despite data from the Office for National Statistics showing the economy growing actually by 0.5% for the month September to October, economists putting that down to temporary burst in spending with the holiday bank weekend or the extra one that we had, of course, because of the Queen's funeral. But we are still heading for a quarter of negative growth. Let's get more analysis with Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, with On the Money. No music this time, but there we are.
We make our own music.
Yeah, exactly. Is it pretty music at the moment? Because it's sort of good and bad, isn't it?
Jeremy Hunt is right. The Chancellor's saying the economy is in for a tough time. There's a little bit of good news out of the Office for National Statistics data, though, that came out this morning. And I've got a graphic here that can spell it out, because it might be a little bit confusing. So let me explain, Mark. So it's in October, if we can go to the graphic, that GDP, that's the sum total of all the transactions in the economy, was up 0.5% compared to the month before, compared to September. But that was largely, Mark, because in September, GDP was lower because of that bank holiday. There may have been a bit of extra spending, but there was a lot less production. So overall, the bank holiday actually took away from GDP in September, which made the October number look good in relative terms. But the much more important statistic is there at the bottom of the screen. Between August and October, compared to the August to October, the so-called third quarter of the year in 2021, GDP actually fell overall by 0.3%. And if we look on the next graphic, that suggests that recession is looming. Recession is when you have two successive quarters of GDP falling. The Bank of England now is predicting that in the final quarter of 2022, that's obviously October, November, December, this is a prediction, GDP will fall by 0.3% again. There's your recession, those two successive quarters of negative growth. It's not just a British thing at all. America, the world's biggest economy, has been in recession for several months. But the Bank of England is suggesting we could stay in recession, the economy contracting for some time.
Yeah, although it's going to be long, they say, but perhaps not that deep. And are there any signs in that monthly figure where it actually ticked up with that bank holiday that certain sectors of the economy perhaps are rather more robust than we thought they may be?
Industrial production is holding up despite ongoing supply chain difficulties that we had as a result of lockdown. They still haven't totally... the world economy hasn't properly rebooted. Manufacturing was at its lowest point of any since the depths of lockdown, mid-2020. There are signs that that's recovering as well. Retail sales aren't doing badly. They're up in money terms, in terms of volume.
But everything's costing a lot more, of course.
Everything's costing a lot more. So there are signs of life, certainly. Unemployment remains quite low in this country. We're kind of middle of the pack. There's a lot of doom and gloom, but compared to all the other big economies in the Western world in particular, we're not doing too badly.
We're sort of still ticking along.
Big danger, in my view, is the ongoing price of fuel, not just because of this cold snap, but more structurally, oil and gas prices.
Yeah, and where are we with that? Because you've written about this in the Telegraph, with China being actually pivotal to this. And clearly we saw the pump prices fall at the forecourts and people think, oh, it's going to get a little bit bad. Oil started ticking back up again. Now, what's going on in the international market?
You'd ordinarily think, Mark, that when the world economy slows, the demand for oil slows, the price of oil comes down. There are two reasons why it's not coming down all that much. It's still quite pricey, around $80, $85 a barrel on some definitions. Two reasons. The first reason is because while the world economy is slowing down, China's actually going to have a little growth spurt because it's easing some of those zero COVID lockdown restrictions. So a lot of Chinese factories are firing back up, and they use lots of energy. It's the world's biggest oil importer.
Yeah.
The other reason why oil prices are staying firm, Mark, is because of something called OPEC+. That's the oil exporters cartel plus Russia. These countries export vast amounts of oil. They don't want to see oil prices fall, so they deliberately restrict their own supply in order to keep demand
artificially
tight.
high. Yeah.
They've been doing it for years. They're doing it again now. And it's interesting that despite the war in Ukraine, here in the UK and the US, a lot of countries don't see the world the way that we do. And America's angry with the likes of the Saudis and other OPEC members for restricting oil supply now when they need cheaper oil to get the Western world out of recession.
And Joe Biden's appeals falling on deaf ears at the moment, it seems. As ever, thank you for that analysis, and we'll keep an eye on the various figures coming through later this week as well. Might give an indication where we are with inflation. But let's head to Doha now to get the latest on the World Cup. And our reporter Paul Hawkins there, as ever. And Paul, it's not coming home, but the team is coming, or at least they're back home. And reflections for both Gareth Southgate and Harry Kane as a result of all that. Hello, Paul, can you hear us? We can hear some music. Hopefully you can hear us. I was just saying that the team, having returned home, reflections for Gareth Southgate
back at 3:30,
and Harry Kane now, once they're back home.
Let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, reflections indeed. In fact, Gareth Southgate has said he felt conflicted about his future, having found large parts of the last 18 months difficult. And what he means by that is England's form running into this tournament was awful, frankly. They lost 3 and drew 3 in their Nations League group. They then were relegated from the group. And so that kind of criticism that he came in for because of their form, fans on the touchline booing him and saying, you don't know what you're doing, that's kind of made him conflicted about his decision on whether he sees out the last 2 months, the last 2 years, I should say, of his contract, which would take him up to the end of the European Championships in Germany in 2 years' time. So there are decisions for him to make, and at the moment he's mulling them over. In the meantime, England are in a period of reflection. Jude Cunningham saying, look, Jude Bellingham, I should say, saying stick with the team when it comes to supporting us. But in terms of what's happening here at the World Cup now, the fans here looking forward to the semi-finals, which starts off tomorrow with Argentina taking on Croatia. That should be a good one to watch. Lionel Messi, will he be a World Cup winner? And that will put him up with the greats, including Maradona and Pelé, or will it be the underdogs Croatia? And then on Wednesday, we've got France against Morocco. Huge historical ties between those two countries, of course, which gives an added spice to it. Morocco, huge underdogs. No one scored against them in this tournament yet. They've only conceded 1 goal, and that was an own goal. First African sides to reach the semi-finals. It's incredible to think that Morocco are 2 games away from winning the World Cup.
Yeah, and of course, that would be a great giant killing act. Have you got time to tell us about Dave the Cat, the extra member of the England squad? No, I'm afraid we lost contact as well. But, Paul, thank you for updating us there in Doha. I can just reveal that Dave the Cat, who joined that England squad at their hotel in Qatar, has also come back on the plane. Maybe a lucky mascot for them in their preparations for the Euros. We shall see. That's it from us for the moment. We're back at 12 tomorrow, weather allowing. Of course, Patrick with you up until 6 o'clock. But let's get that all-important update on what the weather's going to do for the rest of the day.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. The cold theme will continue throughout this week. Further issues with icy conditions in places and a few snow flurries, although most will stay dry. There are low pressure systems surrounding the UK, but actually across the country at the moment, not much in the way of rain, sleet or snow falling, except across northern Scotland. Heavy snow at the moment across parts of Shetland, and that wintry weather will sink south towards the mainland as we go through the night. Ice is the biggest concern across the southeast, where we had snow last night, melting a little through the day and then refreezing as temperatures drop down widely below freezing. Also, fog continues to be a problem across parts of the Midlands and northern England, thickening up again in some some zones here. So murky conditions here to start Tuesday. Still potentially icy across the southeast and snow showers coming in across northern Scotland initially, but then through the day coming down into parts of southeast Scotland and perhaps northeast England too. For many, it is going to be a dry day on Tuesday, turning brighter through the day across the Midlands, northern England, although some will stay murky. And where it does, temperature's not going to get much above freezing. Even with a bit of brightness, we're only looking at highs of 3 or 4 for most. And then down to the southwest, a little weather system arriving. That potentially could bring some snow across the southwest for a time during Tuesday night. Some uncertainty about how far it gets in and therefore how much snow we get. Likely to be rain across much of the Channel Isles. So staying damp here, but elsewhere it's generally another dry day on Wednesday, but more snow showers coming in across northern Scotland and across parts of southeast Scotland and northeast England. For many, it's a sunny day on Wednesday, but it will be cold once more. Temperatures, again, struggling to get much above freezing, maybe 3 or 4 across parts of the south. The cold theme will continue throughout the rest of this week, and there are warnings in place to cover the ice and the snow. Check out the Met Office website for more details on that.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.